All right. I do believe we are live. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Break the Rules stream. I'm your host, Lev Polyakov, at LevPo on Twitter. Today, I have the great teabagger himself, WillyMac, joining us. Thank you so much for coming in.
Yeah, no, I think that's my official title. I appreciate being called as such.
Well, you are part of the tea drinking community, or tea spilling community, rather, which I've gotten acquainted to through Turkey Tom and so on and so forth. But I am very curious about what exactly is going on here as far as how you came up and how you see a lot of the differences today versus when you were starting out with people like Leafy and the various people that were pushing the envelope. Like, according to the videos that I saw of yours, the Wild West is gone. We're just going to be screwed up now with these very sanitized things. All you can do as a historian, I guess, is to cobble together all the lost remnants of the greatness and try to preserve that for the next generation. Is that being
Look,
fair?
that's kind of like a dramatic way to put it, but yeah, and to a degree, I like kind of wholeheartedly believe in that stuff where it's like, we are very sanitized now. Like back in 2016, when like all the like it was such like pushing the boundaries of comedy in a lot of ways in terms of like the online space and what you could do as a creator. We had like iDubbbz that was like fucking naked in the sewers eating pickles and stuff, and Filthy Frank really pushing those boundaries. And even like Leafy was like taking he was the fastest growing YouTuber at the time. Like he was pulling PewDiePie numbers at 100 million views a month, which a lot of YouTubers do that now. But back in 2016, that was crazy. Like that was the top of the top. And, to see a lot of those guys like Filthy Frank end up leaving, like, there's a variety of reasons, but for the most part, it comes down to they were getting demonetized. And, Leafy got banned. A lot of these Monkey Jones got banned for a period of time. And yeah, man, I just think we're at a different phase where, all we can do is talk about these guys and how cool their content was. You can't go and make this stuff anymore. Yeah, which is a shame. It's
not necessarily. Okay, I'm going to disagree with you there. We have people, for example, like, have you ever heard of Frank Hassel?
Yeah.
So he's out there. I mean, he has a Gumroad, and he gets his stuff stolen off the Gumroad.
Gumroad? Isn't that like...
It's kind of like Patreon. I don't know. It's one of those things that people use nowadays in order to make money off of things until, let's say, the authorities get a notice about it, and then maybe they have to move on. So I think right now a lot of people are in this mode of having to go from one place to the other, kind of hunter-gatherers, as opposed to really feeling like, okay, this is the place, this is where we're going to grow, and just like picking up scraps.
Real quick, though, your first example is a guy that he has to use like a third-party shitter website that nobody even knows, to try and get any money. You're not, all the people that are talented and want to make a lot of money doing this shit, they aren't going to go do that thing. It's like the best athletes. The best athletes want to play basketball and they want to play baseball because there's more money in both those things than there is in like, hockey, right?
No, I get what you mean. I mean, a lot of the people, even when Leafy was getting in trouble, a lot of the people that before were for free speech, they all of a sudden started championing this idea like, yes, he took it too far. And like, why do you think that is? Is it because that people just end up selling out at a certain point?
I don't know how many people even like said Leafy took it too far. It's just he got banned and people were like trying to like guess why he was banned, because even still nobody knows. Like these social media websites, because they're like private companies, they don't have to really give a reason. Their TOS is more or less like a facade of rules to make it make everyone think that it's fair and make everyone think like, oh, there's some like clear idea of rules, when in reality, like they could can you no matter what. They don't have to tell you anything. And I think he just got hit with that, like because even still, like I don't think there's ever been a reason. Nobody ever knows, right? Nobody knows. There's a bunch of theories for why he was banned.
But either way, they were in this mode of not really seeing this as being that big of a deal. And why do you think that is? Why do you think fewer of these, big-time YouTubers were coming to the aid anymore?
Oh, because people don't like Leafy, right? I mean, the dude's an ass. The dude was making like content just going after everybody. It was completely like he was just being a dick to everybody. So why would anyone go help you if they don't like you?
Yeah, but
if you're a Twitch streamer, he just blasted Pokemon her having like tier 3 simps and all, like just clowning on her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why would, if you're a Twitch streamer, you'd look at this guy and you're like, yeah, I'm not helping him. You know?
No, I don't understand that part, though, because why is it that Pokimane, and I could be wrong about this, I'm looking at it as an outsider looking in, but why is it that people like Pokimane are considered to be like this untouchable royalty? Like, there was even a stream, I remember the Among Us video game, it was her, it was Elon Omar, it was Ocasio-Cortez, and I think Hassan was also in there, I'm not sure, but when you have all these people in there, it just makes me think that there is some kind of I don't know, I don't want to be a conspiracy guy about this, but when you have this kind of royalty that so many young people are seeing, and that's the angle that they're getting, this particular
like
kind of vibe.
You think they're getting like passes, is what you're saying?
They're getting passes, but not only passes. I think they're getting to be very influential as far as especially like little kids, because a lot of little kids are on Twitch.
Oh, dude, yeah, absolutely. Hassan and Pokimane are super influential. I don't think Pokimane is like people that follow her. I don't think she's a bad influence or anything. I think she's fine for the most part, right? She's done some things, but she gets called out, and then for the most part, I don't think she does it again, like that I could think of, when she gets kind of blasted the first time. Hassan, on the other hand, I think that guy fucking sucks balls. I don't know how anyone watches that dude. Like, he is genuinely an awful person. Like, Hassan genuinely does shitty things constantly. You know?
I don't really go too much into what Kassan did. I went and saw your videos of him. I've seen things here and there, him talking about 9/11. That's one of the things.
Dude, this guy's literally talking about, like, his fans, like, he has a trans debate. Some of his fans didn't like how he handled it. And he tells one of his trans fans, like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about when it comes to trans debates. Like, how that's fucking crazy. Who does that, right? Like, he said something. He got in a drama with Gideon, right? Gideon made a documentary about going to what was dubbed the most racist town in America to see what it was actually like. And he goes there and he ended up thinking, like, you know what, this town's got kind of a bad rap. Like any town, of course, there's racist people, but this town, you know, for the most part, the people are pretty great. His son turns around, he's like, yeah, I hate to say it, this guy just doesn't understand what he's talking about when it comes to racism. It's like, bro, you're telling a trans person they don't know anything about, like, how to debate trans issues. You're telling a black person they don't know what racism is. Like, fuck this guy, dude. That's, if anyone else did that, you'd get fucking castrated. Like, I don't know how he's able to do that shit.
Why do you think people like him?
I think when it comes to politics, you always have the benefit of the doubt of, this is your team, right? Politics content creators get to cheat because if they say they're, you know, Republican or they're Democrat or whatever it is, right? Left, right, however verbiage they use, they instantly have a group of people that will side with them on almost everything. Like, that's how Jeremy, like the quartering, if you know who that is, that's how he rolls. That's how Hassan rolls. The only person that I see like try and push that is Destiny. But yeah, well, that's how all these political people work.
There was a recent change I noticed with Destiny. I want to bring Destiny eventually soon on BTR as well. But there was a change that I noticed where he went from having this utter contempt for conservatives into now, for example, being photographed with Brittany Venti, who I also had on before. So, like, certain people that would be considered to be faux pas, in a way now Destiny's bringing them in. But I also wonder if that is because he was banned off of Twitch by, what's her name, Keffels? I don't know if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah. Like, I don't know the lore of Destiny and how his politics have changed. I'm not super in the political scene, right? I've caught Hassan, obviously, because the dude trends on Twitter every other month. And every stream I watch of him, he's just insane. But, you know, when it comes to Destiny, I think part of him's just kind of black-pilled in the sense that he, you know, he's been banned from, like, every website. Or not every website, but he's been banned from Twitch. They haven't liked him. I think he's also a kind of guy where he's okay to have a conversation with anybody. You know, if he disagrees, they'll disagree, and then that's content. And I think that's fine. I think that's a good trait to have, you know.
And what about your particular, and I know I don't want to get too much into politics, we'll get a little bit more into that once we have the Distributist, who is coming in at 8 p.m. So all the people here who know Distributist, you see over here on the, if I'm pointing in the right direction, we are going to have the Distributist coming in very soon, and that will be a very interesting conversation, because you are somebody who is not the most political person in the world, so it will be very interesting to see what you think of the Distributist's ideas for the world. But how often did you hear certain more reactionary thoughts coming in today? Because I want to kind of see.
Yeah,
if,
I have no
yeah,
clue. Is this guy
no,
like a right winger, or what are we doing?
Yes,
Okay.
he is. Yes, he is a right winger, and it will be. But what is your reaction to that? Because I was like, oh my God, right winger. Like when you hear right winger, what are certain thoughts?
I don't think when somebody says like their political thing, it might as well just be them telling me their favorite color. It doesn't really mean anything, you know. Like when people talk to me, then I have an understanding. But when it comes to politics, dude, I think everyone's just full of shit half the time, you know. Like I don't know. I don't care, right?
I tend to agree as well, but when it comes to that recent thing that happened today, the shooting. I mean, I guess I could say shooting is an algorithm, whatever.
The Buffalo one.
Yeah, the Buffalo one. Yeah. So obviously, you have a lot of the news reporters coming out of the woodwork, blaming 4chan, blaming a lot of these radicalizing things. But I honestly think one of the points that you made in a video of yours, I think back in 2020. Did have to do with this unintended effect of censorship where people are going deeper into these holes, and it's a lot difficult to reach out to them. I mean, do you still agree with that?
I mean, look, it's a touchy subject when it comes to a shooting or something like that, right? But I think when it comes to the internet, you're never going to stop. Everybody's on the internet, so that means crazy people are too, violent people are too. So you could ban people from Twitter, you could ban people from Facebook or Reddit or whatever it is, right? They're always going to find, if they're extremist and they're looking for that stuff, they'll always find their group. They'll just go to a different website to do it. So I think all that banning these people does is they make it so it can't be caught as easily, right? Because if somebody's doing it on 4chan and the post gets 150 views on it, 150 people probably aren't going to think anything of it, right? If this thing goes viral on Twitter, or this gets seen on Twitter, then maybe authorities look into that a lot quicker.
Absolutely,
because 4chan's just another social media site. I don't think that most people that use it are probably fucking normal. It's just like it's been the ultimate red herring of any of these media outlets is 4chan. Just blame everything on 4chan.
Do you like 4chan?
I don't use it because it's just like forums, and I hated the internet back in the days when it was all forums. So I stay away from that. I stay away from Reddit, any of that shit. But for the most part, it's just shit post on there and trolls and stuff. I don't think it's. I have no negative feelings towards 4chan.
So you're more of a you don't like a lot of written content. You like a lot of visual content, a lot of gags, goofs, things of that nature. Like
I kind of like just shit that's recent. And when it comes to the forum stuff, I just think it's really messy. I think it's hard to follow. I think it's boring. It's just like a forum of a topic, forum of a topic, forum of a topic. The internet was not fun until it was fucking like YouTube and like Twitter and things where it was like very concise, clear calls outs of like just everybody, because everyone's on YouTube, everyone's on Facebook, everyone's on Twitter. So those sites to me are more fun. Whereas there was like back in the day, there's like 200 websites of like Game Informer and like, here's the God of War section of Game Informer and here's the,
But don't you think there's something to that, something to the idea of gatekeeping, where it's a lot harder for people to come through, so the people who actually end up coming through are the ones who actually like really, really care about it?
Yeah, I think that's like a fun part of it, but in terms of like creating content and consuming content, then no. So if I'm looking at like, how to build a PC, or I'm looking at, talks about like an Age of Empires esports tournament, then sure, I'm going to go look at the forums. I'm going to go look at AOE Zone. But when it comes to like, I need to be entertained and I want to see Keemstar call fucking Tana Mojo like a dumb bitch or some shit, I'm going to go on Twitter. That's where I'm spending most of my time. That's the most fun.
It's weird, man. Like, I understand where you're coming from, and back in the day, like, even before a lot of this Twitch, YouTube drama, one of my favorite sites to visit was, I don't know if you're familiar with Blog Wars. Do you know Blog Wars?
No, dude, Yeah, I did not get on the internet, honest to God, till like 2012.
All right, so
No.
Blog Wars was, I think, before 2012. This was a Style project. If you're familiar with who Style is, Stile. So he was this weird guy who was hosting like various porn stars and gross out humor, and a lot of things that would be considered to be extremely edgy today.
It
Before it was
sounds
open,
fucking great. Yeah, bring that
yeah.
shit back. Let's go.
No, but here's the big problem. Like back then, a lot of that was just hosted by this one guy, and those who wanted to seek it out, suck it out. Like that was the first place where I saw Joe Rogan because of this video where he went up on stage when Carlos Mencia was doing an act. And I think that there was something very special about having these little communities where people can get to that stuff on their own. Because in a way, I think it keeps a lot of this gross out humor that I think both of us like. But what it keeps away are people who end up later on, professing their hatred of it, thinking that, they're above all of that and they should get rid of that and they should sanitize everything.
Yeah, you're talking about the people that like think, all right, if I make like a joke calling somebody like, I don't know if you could say this on Twitch, the R word, right? If I make a joke saying the R word, which I have a bunch, right? Obviously, YouTube is big enough where people will see that or Twitter will see that, and then they won't like it because they don't find it appropriate. In those small communities, you're kind of like tucked away, so you're good. Look, dude, I get you. That's cool. But the problem is like, it's up to those people that see that shit and don't like it to just fucking block it and know it's not for them.
They're not doing that shit. Instead, what's happening is
that's the fucking problem. Why should I get banned because you don't like my joke? Like, fuck. If you don't like the joke, don't look at the joke. Ban me. Like block me. Don't ban me.
So you know where all those people were? All those. I don't need. Okay. Fuck it, I don't care. I'm going to call them farm animals. All these farm animals were on their fields watching television. That's what they were doing. That's what they wanted to do.
TV is perfect for people like that.
Yeah, they never should have been let out.
You know why people don't watch TV though? Because it's fucking boring. It's fucking boring. You want to get mad at me calling you a retard. All right? Let's face it. I'm providing you entertainment. You get mad. That's what you wanted to do today.
But the same people who are watching TV are now watching YouTube and looking at all the people that are being promoted on YouTube. Again, it's like it's lowering the bar, and it doesn't mean that lowering the bar means like we shouldn't have Leafy, we shouldn't have people who do all kinds of gross out things. Personally, I think that is way more intellectual than a lot of these. I don't even know how to. Yes, exactly. We need more barfs in the world. We need more burps. But what I find though is like on Saturday Night Live, they take a certain aspect of that, but they do it like little kids. If you saw like the latest thing on
Saturday Night
SNL,
Live is fucking dead. Like no comedians anymore like want to go on Saturday Night Live. That like which is funny because growing up that was probably like the end game. It's like, hey, I want to end up on SNL. Like now it's like, no, dude, I want to have my own fucking show, my own channel, my own podcast, where I could just fart around and make jokes. Like I don't know, dude. Like I do think that volatile humor is actually super mainstream. I think people want that. Like that was some of the most popular stuff in the mid 2000s, right? But it's now been dubbed as like, I don't know. Maybe it's because these companies are based in California or whatever it is, right? It's now been dubbed as bad, which is why we see so much less of it, is because it's been dubbed as something you can get in trouble for. And obviously, like, if I'm a guy just making jokes and making money or whatever, and if this joke can get me in trouble, you know what? I might think it's hilarious, but it's probably not worth me, like, losing a show over,
Do you think it makes people stupider in the long run to be exposed to overly sanitized content?
I don't think it makes you stupider or anything. Like, I don't even know if stupider is a word, right? I got fucking C's in high school, so I'm probably a bad person when it comes to judging how smart someone is, right? But when it comes to like I think you deprive yourself of a lot of perspective when you're willing to just block out people's point of view because maybe they use some words that you don't find appropriate. Like I think you're losing sometimes that inappropriate joke in being able to hear that and laugh at that is enough to make you like relax and be like, you know what, maybe we can have this conversation, because we're so like, if we're so emotionally emotionally charged when it comes to things like race or you know, let me think of something else, like a war or whatever it is, right? Then we aren't able to have a productive conversation, because whenever the other side talks, we just start screaming because we're mad, right? If we could hear a joke, laugh, and then be like, all right, let me hear you out. Now you hear me out. Then we're good, right? Emotions getting in the way, I think, blocks a lot of productivity when it comes to like serious topics, you know?
Well, where do you think all of this is going? Like, do you think that right now we're at the peak of this stage and that's it? It's, things are going to start relaxing, people are going to take a chill pill, or do you think we aren't even there yet? Like the whole slippery slope you
I'm
talked about
glad you
before.
said that. I think whoever the current president is, this is my current theory. Whoever the current president is, if it's a liberal or if it's a Republican, right? I think they immediately make everything less cool, because the media is going to fucking report on stories, depicting the president as a bad guy because it gets a lot of views or whatever, right? So whenever it's like, Biden, does he not have the balls? Is he not being harsh enough? Is he not being straight up enough, right? And then it's Trump, and it's like, he's being too mean on Twitter. He called Kim Jong-un his friend or whatever, right? Like, I think whoever the current president is, the pendulum's going to swing the other way, because being the president is just seen as like whatever their point of view is just starting to be seen as lame, because then that's the mainstream, you know?
Do you think that's happening with a lot of woke culture today? Do you think that people have already had enough? Like in the people that you're speaking with, are you noticing any kind of change, or are people just doubling down?
I think there's been talks in our circles of like, there's like another anti-SJW wave like coming. And for people that don't know what that is, that's like that just means like kind of edgy humor, like kind of going against the grain a little bit. And it's because I honestly think it's because there's Joe Biden's in charge, right? If Donald Trump was still elected right now, I think we'd be going the other way, where it's like we aren't caring about people's feelings enough. I think it's natural for a country to swing the other way, because if your life currently sucks, you're going to blame the guy in charge, and the guy in charge is the president. So I think that's just the pendulum when it comes to like election season. So we got another 2 years before we have the primaries. It'll be this. I think it'll get really strict around then, and then once it's over, it'll loosen up again, and whoever's in charge still, it'll swing that other way. Then it'll start beginning.
But people are caring about politics all this time, though. Like ever since Trump, people have been very much caring about it. Tim Dillon, I like his idea of we should go back to what was happening in the 90s, where you had people who were totally out of politics. They just gave up. They like to goof off. And it seems like with every generation, people don't really have that much else to be interested in. Then they just go into the politics hive mind.
I don't know if more people are involved in politics now than they were back in the 90s. I don't know how true that is. I think what we're seeing on the internet is back in 2016, there was just a lot less people on the internet. Like YouTube was so much smaller, where like people were getting, 100 million views a month was the top of the website. Now, dude, like a billion views a month is what some of these channels are getting. A billion, right? Like 10 times more. The website's that much bigger because all these people in India have the internet now. All these people that are 40 years old, like my mom and dad, they only watch YouTube now. They watch so much fucking YouTube, right? So I think the internet's more political and we care more about that stuff just because older people are on the internet. I don't think it has anything to do with like back in the day, people just gave less of a shit. No, dude, there's more people on here, so more people give a shit.
Interesting. I didn't think about it that way. That's a pretty refreshing way to look at it, because
that's honestly how I feel whenever I hear like, oh no, it's just like back in the 90s. It's like, dude, I don't think that's fucking true. I don't like, dude, when 2000, the year 2000, when fucking Bush won or whatever, and over Al Gore with he didn't have the majority of the vote. That was a huge fucking deal. People freaked the fuck out. There was riots in the streets, not about that, but like a few months before 9/11 because of like race stuff in LA. Like this stuff has always been a big issue in the country. It won't disappear overnight. Now, I think it's gotten better, but like, yeah, no, like it's always been a thing. And saying back in the day it isn't, that's just rose tinted glasses.
Oh boy, I cannot wait until the Distributist comes in. This is going to be... Listen, for the people who are here and are waiting for the Distributist, he is coming in at 8 p.m. And once again, this is going to be quite an interesting combination because Distributist, I don't want to speak for him, but he comes in through a very different perspective where
that's cool.
every generation things that are getting bleaker and bleaker and bleaker, and there's not really any way to fix whatever trajectory we're going into.
Every generation that's ever existed right now is the biggest problem. That's how it's always fucking been, dude. It's how it's always been. Literally in like the 60s, you had like a guy win 4 states where his motto was like segregation forever.
Well, not just the 60s. In the 30s and 40s, you had FDR, and FDR, he ran a third term, and he was very close to a lot of the ideas that
he won the third term.
Yeah, he won the third term.
He didn't even run, dude. He didn't even go on debates or anything. He just was like, yeah, I'm not showing up to anything. People will vote me in, and they fucking did. Like, dude, right now is always the biggest problem when it comes to like the world. So for us thinking like, oh, right now is so fucked, blah, blah. Everybody has thought right now is so fucked since every year. But
there is even more to that though, because you had FDR who had Stalinist agents, for Joseph Stalin. They were working for Joseph Stalin and they were working for FDR. He had him in the government, and then when you had people like McCarthy, we're used to thinking of McCarthyism as just being this thing where this guy unfairly was targeting all these, musicians and artists and all that. Really, he was, maybe he overdid it, but he was able to find who the communist agents were very deep in the United States government. And that was also the time, by the way, like late 30s, there was a very interesting book called The Red Decade by Eugene Lyons, where he talks about how all the intellectuals during that time, they had to be Stalinists. If they were socialists, they would call you a social fascist. You had to be a Stalinist. You had to love Joseph Stalin. So when I look at that shit and look at what we have today, like, I don't know, I think that there is a lot of wisdom, despite whatever you may downplay. You may say like, oh, I'm just some guy. I think you are a breath of fresh air as far as people need to keep a lot of these things in perspective.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like, I don't know. I don't know like everything like you're necessarily referencing, right? The last time I heard about McCarthyism was like in high school, maybe. No, but
you can
hated communist is all I know, right?
Yeah, but you can imagine it, right? Like you can imagine America being this place where communism is considered to be, like better dead than red. People did not like communists.
Politics is fucked right now. That's completely normal.
Yeah. Right? But just imagine back then you would have the government that ran the whole thing having active communist agents being at the highest positions of the United States government. That actually happened. And people don't teach that in school.
I have no clue about that. Yeah, that's nuts.
So that's just another nugget of information that hopefully makes people reconsider. Because here's the thing. Okay, I've been doing Break the Rules for about 2 years now. We had recently a split where Gio was on here before. Now Gio, he has quit the stream. And Gio had a lot more of an authoritarian streak as far as his beliefs. But I respect, whatever he wants to do now. But what I find, though, is that a lot of people are in this black hole of almost wanting there to be some kind of tragedy. They almost want there to be some kind of a war, some kind of a conflict where maybe they can prove themselves.
Yeah, because people weaponize... God, this has gotten a lot more political than I thought this stream would. But
oh, you ain't seen nothing yet, but go on.
Like, people absolutely do weaponize every fucking tragedy that happens, right? Like you had fucking the quartering. This is the most dumbass tweet I've ever fucking read, right? He posted a tweet that was straight up like, actually, the Buffalo shooter was left-leaning. He's a communist. And he like pointed to some paragraph. And then like you had the right-leaning people being like, see, this guy's a straight-edge fascist that closer to Republicans because he hated black people and Republicans hate black people, right? And I'm just sitting there like, man, dude, you just can't fucking feel bad and just be like, yeah, this guy's nuts. Like you gotta blame half of the fucking country and like being on his team or some shit as if anyone wanted this to happen. It's so fucked up, dude.
I mean, the one thing I kind of liked that the quartering did recently was that whole Jack Murphy thing, if you recall that story. I actually had Jack Murphy on the show. Do you know who I'm talking about?
I don't know who Jack Murphy is.
Okay, so Jack Murphy, he was a gentleman who was portraying himself as being this very right leaning individual. And very like manly, he had like the big bushy beard with if you search for that name, by the way, if you have a browser open, Jack Murphy, you will see this man with this really, really big beard. And again, I respect him coming on. All that I want to say though is that he had certain ghosts in his closet that he wanted to downplay. And when it came to being on the show, when people were asking him about this article he wrote about being in this cuckolding relationship where he would send his wife out to have sex with this, what was it, Matt from Tinder? And
That's all I need to know, dude. What the fuck?
And this was an article that Jack Murphy wrote, but he became so angry.
He wrote an article about how his wife... He sends his wife out to fuck other dudes?
Yes, and then he would pee on his wife after she came home.
What? Dude, his Twitter bio says, I interview the world's best thinkers.
Yeah, that's also true. I mean, he did have some pretty smart people on his show, but that's the whole point. Like, he just made a change from being this kind of like... He was part of the pickup artist group, like the PUAs. So he was doing a lot of that stuff, and in a way he wanted to show that it was an alpha move to have your wife. Like, it's not like she's having sex with another man because, behind your back. You want her to have sex.
To fuck that other man, yeah!
Exactly, Matt from Tinder.
Yeah, bitch, suck his dick, yeah!
But when this was brought up to him on this on the show that he was in, he got so upset, he started cursing out the host for even mentioning this, and... He's
super embarrassed of it. That doesn't sound very alpha.
Well, he ended up bringing his whole career down because they noticed, like, okay, it's one thing, like, it came out and then the porn videotapes came out of him having a dildo up his ass and, all this.
He recorded a dildo in his ass.
Yes.
Look,
well,
I will shove dildos in my ass, but it will be in private and off camera. I will not do any... Dude, when you have 140,000 Twitter followers... and you get 15 likes on a tweet, that some shit happened. Some shit went down. So he literally lost his career because he was a cuck?
Here's the thing. I don't think it was because he was a cuck. I really think it was because of the reaction that he had to what happened. Because for example, if he were to say, you know what, guys, yes, I was being a silly goose. What are you going to do? That would be one thing. But he went on the offensive against anybody, including the Quartering. Like, he wanted to take the Quartering's channel down. He even had in his private forum...
The Quartering's a fucking huge cuck too, bro. So it's the cuck wars.
Exactly.
Holy shit.
So he had this war room in his private forum. And not only that, but he also had this men's organization still around called the Liminal Order. And in the Liminal Order, it was like this private organization supposed to be like one of the highest tier security systems to make sure everybody's identity is kept secret, which was hacked like in a couple of minutes, But like, this was how he was presenting himself as. He had these breakfasts that people had to pay a lot of money to get into.
It's the most expensive eggs in the world, dude.
Exactly, yes. And then eventually, this whole thing came crashing down. I'm not sure what he's going to do. I mean, look, I still wish him the best. I appreciate that he came onto BTR when he did. However, I do notice that he instantly went going in the other direction when it came to Ukraine. Like, he was very much against... a lot of the U.S. foreign policy, always saying like, wait, well, Russia has a point, NATO shouldn't have been encroaching and all that kind of stuff. So basically making a lot of excuses for what's going on. Uh-huh. And he was doing that back when he was on BTR as well, I remember. Like, he didn't look at Putin as being somebody who is... he saw him as being like this alpha male, kind of like he portrayed himself as well.
This guy sounds like a complete lolcow. I absolutely am interested in making a video. He started his own cult. This sounds crazy. This guy's nuts. The Liminal Order. The website is ass too.
And this is the first time you've heard about this, right?
Yeah, I've never heard about this.
Wow.
Crazy.
So see, there's a lot of things going on in this part of the internet that I'm going to be connecting you with, because another one of the things that BTR does, which is again why it's important for the Distributist to be coming in here soon, is I want to bring on people who have absolutely nothing to do at all with a lot of these particular waves and introduce them into it. Because I think that, like the stuff that you were talking about right now is things that I try to mention, but I think eventually it falls on deaf ears unless they have an outsider come in and talk about them. Because people, I think, are way, way, way too obsessed with the politics. They think the world is coming into an end. And I don't know. Like, I really don't know how exactly to stop this. Do you think, though, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy where if enough people believe that the world is coming to an end, there's going to be a war, I mean, there's going to be, race war, whatever you want to say, that eventually that is going to happen because so many people are going to be so invested in that idea that they'll make it happen.
God, Jesus Christ, man. I don't think there's going to be like a fucking race war or anything like that. I think there could be like a war with China or some shit, but yeah, I don't think so. I think like it's natural for when we're in a probably the most like privileged best years of humanity, right? Especially the United States, like more people have more rights and more money than, maybe not more money because of inflation and stuff, than ever though, for the most part. So I think like it's natural for people to point out inequalities in a place where there is like a democracy and freak out and demand a bunch of shit. And maybe they're right or maybe they're wrong. Maybe they don't understand it or maybe they do. I don't necessarily know all these answers because I don't study that stuff. I talk about dumb YouTube drama, but yeah, I don't think there's any like self-fulfilling prophecy. I think the end of the world is like destined with like could definitely hinge on like China invading Taiwan or some crazy shit, and then the U.S. starting the draft, and then who knows what happens? Everyone's got fucking drones and lasers and shit. Who knows, right?
Well, what about concerns that people have about, I don't know, pornography, for instance? People talk about how way more widespread pornography is out there.
We're in such a blessed fucking world right now. People are crying about guys jerking off all day to fucking porn. Of course, if there's naked women online, of course, everyone who's got access to the internet is going to fucking look that shit up. I don't care if you're a woman. You could be the straightest Christian woman. You probably looked up a pair of tits before, like it's just, I don't think like I'm guessing you've talked to Glink before.
Of course, yeah. No, Glink's great.
Glink's a great guy. I love Glink. His fucking porn shit is like where he's like porn's a drug is nonsense to me. Anything's addictive. Anything can be abused.
Hold on, I'll make a case for Glink, okay?
Go for it.
So there is something inside of our body. Okay, so imagine, for example...
Real quick.
Yeah.
Just so people don't think I'm shading Glink because it's Twitch and I know that shit happens. Glink makes some of the best content on YouTube. I fucking love what he makes. I think he's a super interesting guy. I'd love to be friends with him, right? But his fucking stance on porn is so too much for me. I just don't agree.
All right, here's where I could try to turn you around with this idea. So,
go for it.
Okay, so I think you're a very grounded individual, which is something a lot of people need. I think people have their heads too much in the air when it comes to being stuck in these mental traps of always focusing on politics. Now, with this groundedness, though, I would say that it may block, unless like you sit down and meditate and whatever, it may block certain realizations of some really strange things that are possible. So, for example, I've been meditating for about a couple of years now. I've been doing this thing called the Wim Hof method. It's this breathing technique where you breathe in 30 times and then you stop breathing for about 2 minutes and then you take a really, really big breath in. So as soon as I started doing that, I started seeing psychedelic visions without any psychedelics, without any drugs.
Yeah, are you just like knocking oxygen? Are you just choking yourself out? You're like, I can't breathe? And you're having hallucinations?
No. Everybody says that. Everybody, and I'm going to defend to the death that this is not choking without air. Because what ends up happening is I end up
girl do it, dude. Then that's like porn. Then you're getting the best of both worlds.
That is okay. No, hold on. Just to defend that, this is something that two people could do with this, together. Because what I'm getting to here is tantra. I'm getting here to the idea that we have this primal sexual energy inside of us, and we could transmute that through meditation, through these breathing things. I get to the point where I feel like there is this snake that's going up my spine, and that is also accompanied by various psychedelic visuals. And that is also something where you're transmuting a lot of the sexual power. At least I think so. At least I think that's what's going on. So that, I would say, in defense of what Glink is talking about, that people can use a lot of this sexual energy for other means. There were many examples of people like, like all the great scientists, like, who's that guy who discovered gravity? Isaac Newton. So Isaac Newton.
He
yes.
only discovered gravity because he didn't jerk off for a week.
Not just a week. Yeah, the guy was celibate, and think of like all these monks, and all these people who...
Look, the reality is I'm going to make jokes because I'm not educated on this issue, right? If there is something there, I am the worst person to ask, right? The instant you say sexual power, I'm just like, I don't know what the fuck that means, man, right? I'm just not the guy there. All I can provide is kind of teasing. I don't fucking know. It just sounds like nonsense to me, but maybe there is something there. I know, like, boxers, right? They like to do that because it makes them more aggressive in the ring, and it supposedly gives them more energy. And every boxer says this. All these boxing coaches do this to their pupils and stuff. So I understand it for more of that issue where, like, maybe if you're a salesperson and you got to make a big deal, maybe you're like, what, I'm gonna hold my load for a while, right? But from like a spiritual thing, I don't know. I just don't know anything about that.
It would be pretty interesting if this wasn't just all a bunch of horseshit and this actually did exist. Because think about it. What that would mean is that you would be...
How is that not proven by now, though? Like, surely that's...
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why it's not proven.
Figure out.
No, here's why. Because, okay, first of all, there were various experiments, like people like Rupert Sheldrake do various experiments, not exactly of that sort, but also I think people too easily go into psychedelics. Like, it's very easy to just take some DMT, take some LSD, and just have the trip of your life. To actually sit down like a fucking monk and just meditate in a cave for weeks, that's going to take a lot more effort. And a lot of the new agey people, they combine those things together, where they would do the psychedelics, then they would meditate, and then they think they achieved enlightenment. I disagree. I think psychedelics, and this is another thing that I would disagree with Glink on, or the first thing I would disagree with Glink on, rather, I don't think psychedelics is the way to go. Because when you take psychedelics, you are artificially giving yourself a certain realization that you did not work for.
Look, man, I just come from the thing where if you're taking psychedelics, you're just doing drugs. Like, bro, you can't be that smart on drugs. It's just, I just don't believe that. I had health class in middle school. I just disagree. By the way, I've done fucking psychedelic drugs, right? I've done like mushrooms or whatever. I think it's hilarious. I love it, but and you do feel like, oh, you're seeing things a little differently or whatever. It's just because you're high as fuck.
Wait, how many grams did you take?
Oh, I don't know. My girlfriend bought a bar and gave me some or whatever. So.
All right, see? Okay, you did not take the Terrence McKenna heroic dose. I would be very interested in what would happen.
What does that even mean?
Okay, I think that's like 5 grams, or like 3 to 5 grams. That's the heroic dose. So when you take that, then you go off into the next level. You go off into, you're seeing, at least I saw the spinning wheel of fire, like green fire, the one that Shiva dances around. If you've ever seen that little statue that they have in certain New Age shops, Shiva, which is part of the Indian Trinity, he is the god of destruction. And Shiva does this cosmic dance around this wheel of fire, which represents like the wheel of life, like birth, death, so on and so forth. And then you have this little dwarf that Shiva's stepping on. And the dwarf is supposed to symbolize ignorance. And you can never destroy ignorance.
The dwarf? Yes, the dwarf I'm vibing with very hard right now. Because this makes no fuck. Put me back in church, because this is the same way I would like. The fucking father would be talking to me. He'd be like, yeah, and this is why you can't abort children. I'd be like, what? I'd be like, I don't understand. He'd like, the seed of God is in your penis. And I'd be, what? What do you mean? Jeez, God, get away from my wiener. This shit is done. I am so far from that. Like, my connection to the world is nowhere near any of that stuff. Like, if I were to describe myself, and the reason why I think I've done okay on YouTube in terms of growing is purely I'm the most, like, normal fucking square person where I'm, like, right in the middle of this shit,
But I think that is what makes you special, because you don't have
Special ed for sure, yeah.
you don't have any pretense about you, like you're claiming to be some kind of fucking guru that's trying to solve everybody's problems. I think we have enough of those. But by the way, we have a super chat here from Homework Sucks. 4.99. Okay, accelerationism is the name of the game. All the spooked up terror orgs like... I don't even know if I should say them for the YouTube algorithm reason. I almost feel like this is a trap.
I mean, if you're worried about the transcript going off, then maybe not.
Yeah, but anyway, I don't know. Again, like
Good
this
old
is
waffles, order of 9 bagels. I see.
Yes, exactly. I mean, when it comes to this stuff, I think people are very romantic when it comes to what could have happened. For example, some of my favorite conspiracies are about... have you ever heard of Agartha, Inner Earth?
No, I don't know what that is.
Okay, I will explain. So, there was this guy named Admiral Byrd who, at the end of World War II, supposedly had this quote-unquote exploratory expedition into Antarctica. But theory goes is that it was not exploratory. It was him fighting the Nazis that were stationed in Antarctica. And supposedly the Nazis went into Antarctica, went underground, and not only did they have bases underground, like this is where the UFOs are supposed to come from, by the way, like all the UFO sightings.
Whoa, what?
Yes. Hold on. Give it time. You have to give it time to absorb.
Yeah, okay, no, build. It's a slow burn.
Yes, okay. So there was this lady named Marissa Orsic. She had hair like Cousin It. Like, she had hair going all the way down to her legs. And this is important because the hair, it's like an antenna, like it gives you psychic energy. And supposedly she had communication with extraterrestrial beings who were not in outer space, but they were in the inner Earth. By inner Earth, I mean that we're used to thinking about the Earth as being like this round thing with like a molten, center and the core inside of it that's rock solid. Bullshit, that's not it. What's really going on is you have like an inverted Earth inside of the Earth, and you have a sun that's inside of the Earth, the central sun, aka the smoky god. There was a book that was written about that.
That's kind of the same as just cheating. That's kind of the same as having a molten center, right? You just got like a little sun in there, right?
Yes, but the difference is that people supposedly live inside of this inner Earth, and it's way better in there than it is out here. Because think about it, we're like in the backyard. We're like the dogs that have been left out in the backyard of the cosmos. All the meteors could strike us, and civilization
the people in the middle, like, how is it better?
It's safe.
What do they do?
I think they meditate a lot. I think they just like train their...
I mean, bro, this is the most complex, ridiculous conspiracy theory I've heard since
it's my favorite one. No, it's my favorite one. And supposedly the people there are also giant. Like they have giant races there that could go.
How can you be big inside of the Earth? You're immediately smaller, right?
No,
be tiny people.
No, because it's really big in there. It's actually bigger than out here. Yeah. Because the crust may not be as big as you think it is. I don't know. Like maybe there was something to this idea. All right, like drop any of this sense of this cannot be real.
Hold on. This is what drives me crazy.
Okay.
Maybe there's a sense to this idea. If maybe you were talking about like, all right, Martians or there's like UFO footage or whatever, or there's like this Nazi shit and they found like a tunnel up there with like paper. Dude, shit, I'm in. I love.
They did find tunnels. They did find tunnels.
That's fucking cool. Then I'm in.
Okay, so
but the instant you go, there's a fucking sun in the Earth, and there's giants living down there.
Why is that weird?
All peace and love. That's fucking.
Why is that
no
weird?
Sense, bro. Because what evidence could you have to suggest that? That's like. Fucking tell me Teletubbies live down there, bro. I believe that you could just say anything.
Okay, number one, there is this idea that the various museums, including the Smithsonian, have been destroying the giant statues. And there were statues of about like 12...
statues above ground?
No, not statues. What I'm talking... Skeletons. What the fuck is wrong with me? Skeletons.
Again, why are there skeletons above the ground, though?
because they came from the inner earth and they
They walked out.
They walked out. Yeah. I mean, think about this. Remember the Bible. So you mentioned you had a pastor that was talking about like the seed of God, right?
I did CCD, all that shit. Yeah.
Wait, what is CCD?
CCD is like, do you know what confirmation is? It's like a Catholic.
Oh yeah, I went to Catholic
school. Like a
school.
Roman Catholic. Yeah, you like go and you do like religious school so you could get confirmation and then all that stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm. So you were raised Catholic then?
Yeah, I was Roman Catholic. I was like the full like when you think of church and you see it in the movies where it's like fucking dead silent, everyone shuts the fuck up and is sitting there. That was my church.
No, that was my church too.
Nice, we're brothers.
Exactly. Cheers.
Cheers.
I went to, even though I am of Jewish stock on my mom's side, I went to Our Lady of Grace School in Brooklyn, and my friend was in the Italian mafia there, and it was his parents, cooked, like they made the best pasta, that fresh grown tomatoes in the backyard.
Too. My mama cooks it up, although we miss the mafia part,
Well, if you go wait, which part of Italy are your ancestors from?
So my grandma was from Sicily, and my grandpa wasn't, but my grandpa would be like super racist about it if he was mad at her. He'd be like, Sicily's so close to Africa, you're basically one of the N-words, like he was a fucking dick to her,
Oh, God, simpler time. But maybe there are some mafia people if you I don't know.
Well, no, dude, so I grew up in the Chicagoland area, so every grandma, I don't think my grandma ever said this, but I had aunts that said this, would be like, Al Capone had the hots for me, and everybody somehow knew Al Capone. Everyone's Italian grandma somehow would be like, yeah, Al Capone hit on me, and shit like that. So no, absolutely in terms of but that's about as far as it goes. My family, I don't think was ever directly connected to any of that shit. Well, we were all the dumbass factory workers and shit.
Well, back to the Nazis. So the Nazis went into the inner Earth place, and supposedly they are still there right now. And so all the UFOs are these UFOs that were made thanks to the instructions of the information that Marissa Orsa got from these inner Earth Nephilim people. And the reason why I say Nephilim, the reason why I asked you earlier, were you religious? Did you go to a church? Was because if you recall, in the Old Testament, there was that whole bit about how giants walked the earth in those days, and how the giants had sex with the females of the earth, and not the giants. No, scratch that. The giants came later. So before that, it was just the fallen angels.
Humans back then are getting cucked by the giants, bro. Feels bad.
Fallen angels. It was fallen angels. So, which could have been giants too. So the fallen angels, they were the ones who copulated with the earth women, and they had giants as kids. And from there, they had the legendary races of heroes, men of renown, as they wrote about in the Bible. And later on, they just kind of started dying off. And each generation lived less, you went from 500 years to 1,000 years to 300 years to 180 years, and now we're the idea being is that maybe what we all came from was a higher order creature
of giants and angels or some shit.
Exactly, yeah.
Maybe, I don't fucking know, right? You look back, there was some weird people, animals, right? Or not animals, what were they? They were the fucking cavemen with the Casey Neistat eyebrows and shit. What were they called?
What is wrong with me?
What the fuck were the cavemen people called? They were called
Neanderthals.
Neanderthals. Yeah. They, so you had shit like that. So maybe, I don't know, right? I think they found some weird people that were just hairier remains before. They were essentially old school. They're essentially what we think of as Bigfoots. I think I watched a video about saying hey, these things might have existed. So I don't know, maybe, sure.
But it's when we think of these,
to think those people exist in an inner Earth, though, that just sounds fucking insane to me. We could split atoms, but you're telling me we don't know if there's a fucking whole fucking world inside of our world?
How would we know?
That sounds wild, but maybe.
How would we know? Here, I'll give you this example, okay?
I would think we scan the Earth, right? Like, don't we do that? That's
No.
how we know shit's there.
We can't scan it that deep. No.
Okay, shit. I don't know then. Maybe. I have no fucking
All right,
idea.
good. So you're on board. So all of this, all these stories.
Entertain it. Yeah,
yes,
sure.
all these stories about the UFOs where they talked about how, oh my God, the UFO went underwater and came back up. This was written about back in the 1950s. This is nothing new. So as I want to tell you, I think that the UFOs are run by the Nazis. Not only that, but I think that there is like
Nazi. Are they all inbreeding with each other? I mean, how many generations deep of Nazi? We got to be 3 deep. So
I think they're
Nazis running UFOs, bro.
No, I think they're inbreeding with. I think they're breeding with the Nephilim. I think they're breeding with the giants. So they're just like the old days. Just like the old days.
I need another beer before we go any farther.
Everybody, listen. If you guys are enjoying this, don't forget to subscribe. Press the subscribe button right now. It is extremely important that you do so. BTR must grow right now. BTR is going to be growing stronger and stronger and stronger. There is no way that this could stop. It's going to keep on going because the goal of BTR is to bring all of these different people together who have never spoken, and this is why the Distributist
is real fucked up. You know why? Because
why?
If you're the Nazis, you did some of the most horrible fucking shit in the world, right? You did all this, genocide, all these concentration camps and shit, and then at the end, you get to go into like some inner society and just fuck giant pussy. What kind of sick world is that? You know?
I can give you my answer to that. And by the way, we have the Distributist coming in the best time of all.
What's up, Dave?
Hey, I didn't realize that was part of the timeline of the Nazi regime.
Must
have missed that in the history books.
Documented, I think.
Okay.
So, no, before we go on further, Dave, welcome. Great of you to come in. Before we go on further, though, I do want to give you my answer to what I think makes this a lot fairer than it may appear to you right now, WillyMac. So I think that once they actually came into the inner earth and experienced all these things, it's like you're experiencing something you are not ready for. So the amount of psychic harm, just like the amount of agony that you are going to experience now that you're at that level. Imagine it's like getting a 5-year-old to run a marathon. Okay, you just take a 5-year-old, just stick them in the marathon running and have him run the marathon. Don't let him out. But he cannot die. He'll always just have to persist running this marathon. I think that's
Who are we talking about right now?
The Nazis. No clue. We're talking about the amount of pressure. No, WillyMac, let's stay focused. We are talking about the amount of pressure that I think the Nazis would experience once they reach inner Earth. Once they reach Agartha, this is the amount of shit they're going to have to deal with. They're not in Kansas anymore. It is going to be way tougher. And I think they're going to experience karmically a lot of horrible feeling in order to make up for the horrible things that they did. With that, I'm bringing in the Distributist. Dave, thank you so much for coming in again, brother. I really appreciate it.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going
Dave,
right.
It's going great. I've had a great time so far.
Yes.
Sounds like you're pretty knee deep into a conversation already, but
no, that conversation is already that UFO has flown.
Up.
Yes, that we wrapped it up.
Cool.
Yes. So now, Dave, I would love for you to give a little bit of background for Willy as far as your positions go, because we are not going to have Layman coming in. Unfortunately, Layman's not feeling good, but I think that this is going to be even better because you're going to have a chance to speak with somebody who has absolutely no idea what a lot of these things are, and it will be a good thing to get somebody who's not involved to kind of hear your point of view out. So as far as...
So are you like a YouTuber or like what? Just
yeah, I do. I've been making YouTube videos since about 2016.
And so you've been around a minute then. You're like kind of one of my boys from back in the day then.
Yeah, it's I've been around for a while. I don't know. It feels like not that long ago, but I guess it has been a long time in internet time. But yeah, I guess my school of thought generally is sort of right wing, kind of reactionary adjacent. Is what I'd say.
So you're like a political creator then?
Yeah, I do political videos. Yeah.
Okay.
Mostly, well, I do some stuff about culture too. Usually sort of the intersection of the two. But yeah, I don't know. Originally, I think I was going to talk to Layman about he's a centrist of some kind, right? And I've been a huge critic of the sort of anti-SJW centrists because I think that they miss a lot of stuff. And that was
What is an anti-SJW centrist, just so we can get that?
Oh, like Adam and Sitch and stuff like that.
Yeah, so just people who don't so is that, if that means like I've made a video on like I don't know if you know what I do. I make commentary videos like Leafy or whatever. So I made a video on the quartering because he's like whole thing is anti-SJW.
Yeah, the quartering would be another good example, right?
Okay, so is he okay, so by anti-SJW centrist, do you mean people that hate anti-SJWs or people who are anti-SJWs?
I mean people who don't like the progressive woke stuff.
Okay, all right, cool.
But at the same time, don't understand where it comes from.
All right,
which is that like the woke stuff is an outcropping of how we've set up society in the modern world, and it's based on a lot of decisions that go back at least 50 years. And so what you end up doing is you critique all the results of these larger effects, but you don't actually get to the core of the problem, which is more or less how we set up politics and power and prestige in the modern day society.
Okay.
So what would you say would be certain things that you would want to change, rearrange in the modern society as far as liberalism goes? So like certain things that maybe we take for granted today, like civil liberties, for instance. If we can point at one civil liberty and where you think it went wrong and how do you think it could be addressed, feel free to choose anyone you want, Dave.
Well, the question, it's not a well-posed question, in my opinion, because it's not like the liberties that are the problem.
But what the liberties gave birth to, that would be a fair way of saying that, right? Or no?
I guess so. I mean, what the liberties gave birth to, essentially the big problems, the problems started emerging in sort of the post-civil rights conception of rights. There were a number of other transformations of our concept of rights, specifically in the New Deal, but civil rights created not only a set of rights that were sort of difficult to maintain, or a set of promises, I should say, that were difficult to maintain. It also created an avenue for the endless expansion of bureaucracy and the endless expansion of the idea of protected classes and disparate impact, which is what you're seeing when you're saying this woke stuff. When you see this woke stuff is the logical extension of things like affirmative action and disparate impact and equal opportunity carried forward after 30 years of being inculcated into corporate HR departments and university campuses. And unfortunately, no one has a solution for this because we've essentially made the civil rights revolution sacred. So we can't very well say, this is a mistake. We can't make good on this promise. And in the meantime, it's essentially handed power over to this class of bureaucrats that run society at all levels, and will continue to do so as we see the bureaucratization of the government and things like there was recently the creation of the misinformation wing of the Homeland Security Department.
Yeah, well, that's that lady that I put on the thumbnail cover. Yeah. I know, Willie, if you're familiar with that lady we're talking about.
No idea.
So Dave, what is she in charge of?
Well, that's not very clear at this stage. All we know is that the Biden's created a new, I don't even know what you call it, but it's essentially a sub-department of the Department of Homeland Security. And this is the Department of Misinformation. Now, this is a great example of something that all liberal thinkers before the 90s would immediately understand is just horrible and a betrayal of everything liberalism has to rely on. Once the government wades into the discussion over what's true and what's not and creates a Department of Truth or a Ministry of Truth, and it starts essentially saying, okay, as the government, we're responsible to make sure everyone tells the truth. At that point, the government has completely closed the loop on its own creation because now it's created an avenue where it decides what's true, it decides what's right, it decides what's good, it informs the people, and then the only thing left is for it to collect the votes. And since it controls the information inputs it will eventually control the information outputs. The only way liberalism ever hypothetically worked was that there was an independent market of truth outside of the government itself and outside of the government bureaucracy.
Do you
Without
feel
that,
like,
it's basically what the CCP has with more steps involved.
yeah, do you feel like I guess the government does control the media?
It would be more accurate to say that the media controls the government. The
Because
government,
the government was doing the thing where, look, I only know about stuff kind of involving when it relates back to social media, so we are way out of my my fucking level of knowledge, right? We're way up here. I'm like down here, right? But the government was doing a thing where they, like, Biden's office, or at least the way she presented it, was calling sites like Facebook or Twitter and being like, hey, this is misinformation. It would be in your best interest to try and abide by that. And of course, if you're Facebook or Twitter, you're going to go ahead and do that because you don't want them to start, like, not liking you and start making policy or taking away, like, your protections and shit.
There's 1,000 things that could go wrong if you don't cooperate with the government. Yeah, and so this is, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter whether government controls the media or whether the media controls the government. The problem is that the locuses of power in both cases are the same group of people. And once the people who create the policies are the same people who report on the policies and justify the policies and think about the policies in the universities, once they're totally aligned, then you have a state that has no external controls on it. The external control that we thought we had under liberalism basically relied on sort of a separation of powers and an independence of individual thinkers. And eventually this eroded due to a variety of circumstantial things. But that's what we're dealing with right now.
I give my kind of opinion on this.
Sure, yeah, go ahead.
I think there's probably like a greater what's it called? A more diverse set of news and media now than there probably has ever been.
Absolutely false. I totally disagree with that.
Because now, like, I can go make videos, like, talk about the news, right?
Oh, maybe because maybe if you
not like Jeremy's doing it, and Jeremy's like his own independent.
Or Joe Rogan, for instance. I mean, that's the big one.
All these people can go ahead and make videos talking about it. You don't have to work for Fox or CNN or NBC or whatever to go ahead and make your own videos talking about shit that's happened.
The internet has broadened things a little bit, but just generally speaking, if we're talking about the range of ideas that people discuss, the range of different ideas has radically contracted over the last 100 years or so.
Define the range of different ideas.
Well, you wouldn't have any problem finding free love people in 1920 in the universities or communists in the universities, but you have a very difficult time finding monarchists in the universities or Georgists in the universities or
Georgists? Holy shit.
Well, you see, again, that's a huge school of economic thought, or mercantilists, right? These are huge schools of thought that are just disappeared, right? It's like languages. The number of languages that are in the world has gone down in the last 100 years.
Okay.
And so has the diversity of ideas. Now, maybe the internet's going to reverse this. That's a huge point of hope. But at least before the advent of the internet, the contraction of the idea space has been really radical. And just in my own life, if you look at the universities, I mean, the intellectual diversity in a university classroom in 2020 compared to 1980, oh boy. I mean, well, I wasn't really looking at the universities in the 80s, but modern day college students are just incapable of conceptualizing anything outside of a very narrow band of ideas that they're introduced to by their professors. And they'll get offended. They'll start panicking if you introduce them to anything outside of that envelope.
Right, because young people, I don't care who it is, young people all the time think they know everything. Like high schoolers think they know everything, and then when they're challenged, are kind of mind blown. That's why you have people like Destiny, where he was like in his 20s and he was like full, like super liberal. He's like, yeah, I'm a capitalist, and now he kind of like is seen as like a little bit more in the middle than he used to be. So I think
I don't know. I mean, Destiny, in my opinion, is very much inside the narrow envelope of acceptable ideas. Destiny is very much a reflection of the typical. Maybe it's a little bit to the right of where the modern universities are, But at least when I was in the universities, destiny is very typical of your standard
How
college.
old are you? Were you in the universities like in the like 90s
No.
or whatever?
I was in the universities like in 2005, right? But I went to graduate school multiple times, and I saw it change over the course of getting several degrees.
Yeah, you know
and
what?
so I have a broad survey of how that idea has changed between 2003
I'm set to kind of
2000.
believe you on that stuff, just because like shit, dude. It felt like every school, like when I was in college or my friends were in college and I'd get invited over to parties, it was like all these schools I would go to would be like, if I talked to somebody there, they'd be like, if you liked Donald Trump, get the fuck out, you know, like shit like that. I'd
that would be inconceivable in 1980.
I didn't even fucking vote. Like, give me a break.
Wait, hold on there, though. I want to kind of counter what Dave is saying. In the 1960s, though, you also had, I mean, maybe you could say you had more of a diversity, but the kind of diversity that we're talking about here, you had people who were ardent Maoists, Leninists, people who were very much, being, I think, professor-wise, being paid by the USSR at that time. That was still a great power that did have a lot of influence over young people's education. And I was also bringing up to Willie before you came in, you're probably familiar, Moldbug mentioned this book, and I read it later on, The Red Decade by Eugene Lyons. Dave, do you know that book?
Yeah, I know. I'm not contesting that the universities were left. They've been left for the last 100 years, pretty much. Actually, almost exactly. The 100 years ago, that's when the universities first really started going left. But still, there was a larger range of ideas on the university campus. You could find non-left ideas on the university campus, and college students and college professors were much more able to conceptualize and argue over a variety of different ideas. And you just have to look at videos of debates in colleges in like the 60s.
Do you feel like that's a generational thing, though, to a degree? Like for instance, like you've had all these Republican parents for years being like, all right, if you want to make money, you go into business, you go into sales, you go in creating your own thing, right? And then you had all these fucking lefty people being like, teaching's great, healthcare, fucking whatever. So of course, like generationally, the farther it gets down the line, there's going to be a bunch of left-leaning people in schools because all those people get taught that they to love education and art and
and how
I think there's an argument for that being the case maybe in the 70s or 80s. I don't think that might have been the reason why in the 80s
I'm talking about that's why it's like that now.
But all right, but now now it's permanent, right? Because now
it's not
even if how does it go back, right? Because there aren't Republicans who are going to the universities to be college professors.
But
because
maybe something happens where that is the
thing,
right? It's the fucking, you can never predict what's going to happen.
You can't predict what's going to happen, but you can see the dynamic. And I think that the universities are just going to degrade in quality until they're replaced by something.
I think it'll get to the point where it's like, instead of a university, why not go to like a trade school of sorts? Like, for instance, I did film. I went to a trade school for film. Most of the people there, like most of the kids, it didn't matter what color skin they had. Most of them were more right-leaning just because they wanted to start their own business and go into stuff like that.
Okay, but the trades, but that kind of contradicts your original point, right? Because you were saying, hold on. You were saying initially that it would reverse when more Republicans became teachers and academics and stuff like that. But you don't get to be a teacher or an academic in trade school. And the teachers and the academics will. I mean, this is sort of the process that at least my school of the right loves pointing to. The teachers and the academics control the ultimate direction of ideas, and it's filtered through the media and then through the government.
I guess what I was saying,
unelected officials.
Just to clarify what I was saying, I was kind of at a cutting edge school, so I'm saying there would probably be more. Maybe there would be more schools like that, So if you want to go to business, instead of going to get like a 4-year degree, you just go to like a 2-year fucking school to set you up and figure that shit out.
Yeah, and I'm sure that right wingers are going to do that more, but that's not gonna make that's not gonna reverse the trend in academia, right? Because that's just continuing the trend that you brought up initially in the 70s and 80s, where the right wingers just don't do academia anymore.
No, maybe you're right.
I have a counterpoint though for what Dave was talking about. How much do you think college in general today, if we're not talking about trade school, if we are talking about this professional managerial class stuff, how much do you think that is kind of like looking at television once you have the internet? Do you know what I mean? Like, how much do you think a lot of these ways that people got education is going to be as important to companies going forward? I know that there were some tech companies, I don't remember their names right now, that made it a policy not to discuss anything political in the in the workplace. Almost like they're starting to become aware of how toxic this entire thing is, and even though they can't outright say, if some of them have opinions that would be considered to be faux pas, they are trying to, I think, in a way, make it so that people can go through their workplace without having all of this woke propaganda be there all the time.
We'll have to see, but the thing is, Lev, this, like I said, this is not a pure market force you're seeing here. The reason why this woke stuff is in corporations is because in many ways it's mandated in law through the Equal Opportunity Commission. Now, Richard Hanania, who's sort of I don't exactly know what his ideology is. He's kind of a former progressive that's done a rightward turn. He's done a lot of work detailing this, but there's a reason why all corporations are woke, and that is because of extensive civil rights law from the 1970s.
I don't even think all corporations are woke, dude. I don't know why you say that. What do you mean by woke, I guess?
I mean that, okay, so I worked a lot in industry. You will go through an HR department course that will bring you up to speed on things like microaggressions and gendered pronouns and all this sorts of stuff. This is these companies, they hire out HR consultants.
Where do you work?
I was in Cali, and now I'm in the East Coast.
Don't you think that plays a role in it, though? You're in a corporation in fucking California, dude. That's just the culture out there.
Oh, and New York too.
In the Midwest, I never fucking saw that shit.
Okay, great. But so the economy, this is another thing too. You may have realized this. Things that happen in California eventually get to the Midwest. You can see this quite clearly, right? You think it's only in California that eventually comes to the Midwest.
Like, give an example.
I'm telling you, like gay marriage. Right?
Dude, gay marriage. I think gay marriage is a totally legit thing, though.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that the trends, the social trends you see in New York and California eventually spread out. You can think they're good, you can think they're bad, but it's unquestionable what direction it goes in.
But you pointed towards a good thing, so obviously good things should spread, right?
No. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong thinking. This is no. This is, you're confusing is and ought at a fundamental level, right? Okay. I'm talking about sociological phenomenon, not our opinions on whether they're good or not, right? Like, we don't divide the universe into good things and bad things. We try to categorize it by what kind of phenomena it is and then map its progress through.
Describe phenomenon, though, because like obviously the current culture does put things in good or bad.
I don't know what you mean. I mean, you're saying that.
I'm saying that it makes sense that like a progressive idea that's good would spread, right?
If I showed you a progressive idea that like white privilege would be a good example. Like, all right, there we go. I was seeing that in like the early 90s in California. It comes out of Harvard in early 1980s, right? So early 1980s, it's in Harvard and Berkeley. Early 1990s, it's like in most educated circles in California. In the early 2000s, it's in all the major cities. Now it's like in kindergarten classrooms. Okay. Like we can go through all of the examples. There are tons of them,
just to clarify, when I question you, it's because I don't know, right? So I'm
sure, that's fine.
Asking you to fucking, to just cite something so I can understand.
No, I'll give an example. Right? I mean, that's all of these trends you can see coming down the line. They take this path. Now, I assure you that, like, Coca-Cola, which comes from, isn't their headquarters in Atlanta? They're just as woke as everyone else, right? Lockheed Martin, who makes weapons, is woke. Like, their HR department, like, there are things that come out. Like, you can see this on Twitter with the people who they spend all their time covering this stuff. Like, you think Lockheed Martin and since Coca-Cola is a Southern company and Lockheed Martin makes missiles, you think that they're right wing. But people report from their HR seminars, and like Coke is running HR seminars where they tell their employees to be less white. Right. So like that was a famous quote that came out last year.
If they say the term "be like white," that sounds fucking insane to me.
Okay,
But
but
if
this
it's
is
just
coming
like,
out of a corporation that comes from a
fucking
red state, right?
dick to your black employees, then I'm like, that makes sense. But yeah, if it's as blatant as be less white, then that's fucking crazy. Yeah.
No, but even the
This is an
idea of
example
saying,
of woke capital,
yeah,
right? This is
sure.
a phenomenon that's really easy to observe right now, right?
Okay.
You can see it in all major corporations that function with an HR department
Yeah, you had
because
like
there's a
that
legal.
Gillette commercial where it was like,
Yeah, Gillette's a great
boys will
example
be
too,
boys,
right?
and it's like that was seen as like a really bad. Boys should not be boys.
Yeah, so this is a company that markets mostly to men,
Yeah.
that markets mostly to like masculine men. That was always their demo. That demo skews right, and they release woke propaganda. So
Go on.
So and the question is, if a company comes from a conservative place or markets to a conservative population or sells to the military, which is traditionally conservative, why is it that those corporations are going woke? Well, they're going woke because of the law, basically, because of things like disparate impact and the human resources regime that comes at a disparate impact in protected classes. And also the force of the universities.
All right, so
know, dude.
I have a
Go
counter
ahead.
to this. So, all right, so Dave, I definitely understand a lot of these things you're talking about. I mean, it's not my first rodeo in terms of hearing a lot of these things, and I think more people should hear about them. But what I think are certain silver linings that are that I'm at least seeing. I know I mentioned this organization before, FAIR, the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, and I know that some people more on the right see it as being a very, centrist organization that's very, prim and proper. But when you were talking before about how a lot of the liberals are repeating the talking points of the conservatives back in the early 90s, I actually see what's going on right now as something very interesting, because if they are getting on board a lot of these talking points, things that maybe, they and their positions would have ignored back in the day, maybe that means that if we have organizations that are legitimate, that have lawyers behind them, that can advocate for people who end up being discriminated against in this kind of like reverse way, if you could say that, then I think there may be a chance to slowly start to fix a lot of these problems, because I never want to just look at history and say like, okay, it's just going to go into this trajectory. Things may come in waves. Things may come in, it gets to a peak, and then as soon as it becomes incredibly ridiculous, then things start to slowly change from within the elite. I don't think it would change from a grassroots level. I think it would change from the elite when enough elites see what happens when their kids go into schools where they're taught absolute bullshit, which was the experience a lot of the parents that I was speaking with, who bring their kids in these very highfalutin places where they're being taught how evil they are because they're white, and these are like 10-year-olds, 11-year-olds. So that I see as the hope.
You would predict that like blue staters like Nancy Pelosi is going to balk at this and decide that she should become anti-woke when her grandchildren see this,
No, not Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi is...
But her friends, right, or something.
I would say
her
friends of friends of friends, neighbors of neighbors of neighbors. That's the way that I would say it. I don't think it's something... I don't think we've had enough time right now to see how exactly a lot of these, I guess you could say, former Jon Stewart watching liberals, former Bill Maher watching liberals may start to come around. I don't think they would do it in the reactionary way of, I'm going to attack it head on. Because, I don't know, maybe it's because I like thinking just in terms of deeper, like more underground type of strategy when it comes to these things. Not everything has to be set out in the open. Certain things could be done a little bit quieter, a little bit behind the scenes, as long as they end up having the right consequences, because I think there are a lot of people that I've spoken to who you would say, well, these are just like the average Bill Maher watching liberals that are sick to death of a lot of this stuff, but their approach to fixing it may be a little bit differently than yours.
I guess I can't predict the future. Maybe that will happen. What I can say is it didn't happen in the 90s. All that happened is people got more and more powerful. They got a little bit quieter for about 10 years, and then they came back twice as powerful. The reason why they came back twice as powerful is that even when they were quiet, they were still hiring people with their opinions. if this is going to be reversed, then there are going to have to be a lot of people who lose their jobs. At this point, there are an enormous number of bureaucrats who we pay to be ideological in this way. There's going to be a pushback on this stuff. Those people are going to lose their jobs, and they will not lose their jobs quietly. These people are not quiet people. So, I can't predict the future, but anybody who stops this trend, it's not going to be a subtle thing. There's going to be a lot of people who fight back on any attempts to unseat wokeness. I mean, just right now, there's a lot of elite universities in this country, and there's been an enormous amount of mayhem caused by this woke stuff over the last, I've been doing YouTube for 6 years now. This woke stuff was going on in these universities to the point where they were losing, like in MISU, right? Missouri State, I think. They lost a huge number of their incoming class because of the woke explosion. Can anyone here name any major university that has had a serious woke pushback to the extent where they were firing administrative staff to become less woke? Has that ever happened? And it's been 6 years since I started my channel.
Probably
right?
not, because being woke, what is it? The road to hell is paved in good intentions, right? So it's you probably aren't going to fire somebody for being you know what, whatever, insert woke thing here, right?
Okay, but think of how many people have been fired for being associated with a microaggression.
I have no idea.
A ton.
I don't know how many.
Lots of junior professors, lots of administrative staff have been fired for transgressing against wokeness. So in the 6 years since I've done my channel, after the point where it already was obviously insane on these university campuses, there have been more people fired for being anti-woke than there have been people fired for being woke. That means we're still going in the woke direction. So if the whole Yale and MISU stuff was not, if that wasn't insane enough in 2016, the insanity barrier has to be beyond that point for people to wake up.
What do you think about the I just see this on Twitter, so I haven't looked into how true a lot of these stories are, but every it seems 2 days there seems to be somebody trending that says I'm a trans teacher, I had a gay pride flag in my classroom or whatever, and staff's come in, they told me to take it down, they've said I can't tell my students that I'm trans or gay or that I got a husband or whatever it is, right? So would that count as maybe they don't fire them, but they're kind of pushing them towards just
they've got a few people
get the
fired.
fuck out and quit? Yeah, isn't that being fired for being woke, right?
Yeah, there have been a few people who've been fired for being woke, but it's got to be way more extensive than that. It's got to be at the level of the universities and down on through the federal administration.
The universities, do you feel that's the ultimate place of influence?
Yeah, it is. Ultimately, yes. The new ideas.
Even with the internet, with all these social media people and YouTube being, I think YouTube's probably, most of the creators on YouTube, I think, are fairly, more right than on Twitter. At least Twitter is super lefty, but I think.
Okay, but who do the people?
YouTube's fairly pretty much right. A lot.
Who
of
does the ruling class listen to?
The ruling class. Looking for new ideas. I don't even know who the ruling class is. Just people with money.
No, the people who make decisions about policy in our country, right? Or people with money, right? You could include rich bankers. Who do the people who go to Davos and manage banks listen to? Who do the people who run the New York Times listen to? Who do the people who run Hollywood listen to? Who do the people who staff the State Department listen to? Who do all the congressional staffers listen to?
Of course, Hollywood is left leaning because all the people that parents are yo, you want to be a fucking actor? No, don't do that shit. Go into business. It's fucking, of course that's that way.
Okay, but we weren't arguing why it was that way. We were arguing whether it was that way.
Yeah, no.
And despite your reasons for why it was that way, it is that way. All the people at the top who run major organizations in a political capacity all uniformly get their ideas either directly from the universities or from the universities via the mainstream press like the New York Times. Okay. The New York Times gets all of its ideas from Yale, Harvard, and Berkeley. And most of the ruling class, again, gets all their ideas either from the university or they get it from the New York, or people like the New York Times or prestige media, which is just adding another step into the process.
Okay.
But don't you think that a lot of these not only the universities, but the people that absorb a lot of these things from the universities. If we're looking at Psaki and the lady who ended up replacing her, there just seems to be a lot of, a lot of weakness. Not to say that they're not strong in maintaining their particular brand, but it almost seems like people who are aware, people who are capable of building something, creating something, kind of like the future Elon Musks of the world, I think that they'd be looking at people who are going in that direction, if not lower, in the next several years or a decade or so. And I think that they'd be, kind of laughing to themselves, like, who the hell are these people? Like, why do these people have any, say in how the system ends up working? And I don't think they're going to be alone. Like, if you have enough people that have been able to make money, that are innovative, that are able to create certain things out in the world, I don't think these people would have an ounce of respect for Jen Psaki or any of these Washington insiders. I think they would just spit in their face if they wanted to. So those are the people who I actually see creating a different sort of reality here, teaming up with, let's say, DeSantis in Florida, people who are right now having a bit of a pushback on a lot of this stuff. Because if it gets worse, like, okay, Dave, let's say you're right. Let's say it gets so bad that it becomes absolutely insufferable, even more than it is right now. Mm-hmm. You would have to assume that a lot of these future Elon Musks of the world are just going to sit there quietly, not do anything, not figure out some kind of way to make sure that their kids are not going to be absorbing this bullshit. And this is why I'm giving you the counter argument that at least having my feet on the ground of the people who are complaining about this stuff, these are not poor people. These are not people without connections.
Yeah, that's definitely the failure mode, right? You're absolutely right about what you're saying. Is that's the emerging dynamic. It's going to be people who are. It's going to be basically the deep state and the universities versus people who are practically powerful, whose power derives from being able to deliver practical results, either through business or through techniques. But that's a hard fight. It's a hard fight because there are very few of those sort of practically powerful people. And the relative amount of power they wield at the government level is very limited. And furthermore, they're not spontaneously self-organizing.
No, I agree. I know that it's a hard fight, but what's important for me, at least in this kind of fight, is that it's still done within our very flexible liberal framework. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I don't want to be bad faith when it comes to how you see the world, because I know that you were talking about Caesarism, not in the case that you want there to be a Caesarism. You see that as being more inevitable. But as you've probably heard me talking many times about, criticizing the top-down governments, that they are very inflexible. They have a lot of ass-kissers who only want themselves to appeal to whatever authority is above them, and so on and so forth. And sure, you can say, well, it's like that right now. But
yeah,
again,
I'd say that exactly.
I knew you were going to say that. But again, this is why I say that within our liberal system, it makes sure that there are still going to be people like DeSantis coming around. And I have plenty of examples of societies where that is not the case, where you actually don't have that much of a choice at all, where it literally is a boot on your neck type of society. That is always the example that I give to people who are more reactionary, and I'm not saying that you welcome there being a king, but you got to admit plenty of people do welcome the idea of, or rather they'd look the other way if, for example, we did have like a Mussolini 2.0, for example. You know what I mean,
or
right?
An FDR 2.0.
Or an FDR 2.0, exactly. I mean, Willie, we were talking about FDR before Dave came in.
These sort of supremely powerful executives, right? They are... they're not always good, but they're sometimes just inevitable, like amputating a limb that has gangrene on it. The problem with the democratic process as we have it set up is that it essentially, first of all, when you have people like DeSantis and Elon Musk coming around, you'll notice something, and that is when they come on the scene, they're not causing the system to become more moderate or move to the center. All they're doing is splitting away their side further away from where the rest of the government and the universities and the elite media are already going. So what you see there is more of a division than a moderation. So that's one problem.
Well, that's a start.
So eventually this is going to come to a head, right? Eventually there's going to be a conflict over this. Not necessarily, I'm not saying an armed conflict, but there's going to be just an open power struggle. as these sides diverge. And the difficulty with, you know, this democracy idea is that it's very difficult, or the quote unquote democracy idea, right? Because we're not really a democracy, but it's very difficult to seize power at a large level from the side that we're talking about, from like the Elon Musk side. But it's very, very, very easy to seize power from the Jen Psaki side.
Willie, what do you think of that?
This is like way above my head. I have no fucking clue what's going on.
All right, the one thing,
if we reconnect this to the fucking internet, maybe I got an idea. I don't know. I think Elon's influential. I think people like him, but I don't know. This is way above this concept.
I don't think
above me.
I don't think DeSantis and Elon, you know, they're not good enough for a lot of these, you know, a lot of these, you know, pinky drinking people like Chris Alton over here in the chat, who is like, DeSantis and Elon, they're both liars. Where it's like, look, you're never going to have a perfect solution to a lot of these things. You're going to have people who maybe have grifters or whatever. I don't give a shit about that. What's more important to me is that there is a sense, at least in the people who are following, you know, people like Elon, DeSantis, that there is some way out. And I understand what Dave is talking about as far as there may be some kind of a struggle later on. Again, I think we're only looking at it from the limited amount of information that we currently have right now. And history in general has had a lot of these ups and downs. Again, talking about when most of the intelligentsia were Stalinists, when we had Stalinist agents in the White House thanks to FDR. And again, I'm not looking at somebody like FDR as being a great example of American president. I don't even know what would have happened if the guy would have lived. So in a way, like...
how do you see that, how do you see people like DeSantis saving the situation? Wouldn't at some point he have to pull the mainstream New York Times and Harvard people to the right at some point? How does he save?
I just like the guy Michael in the chat. He's just like, maybe that's not the problem. Maybe the country literally balkanizes.
That's what's literally happening right now.
That's my favorite.
That's what a lot of people think are happening. No,
I think it's, I mean, like right now we have half the country who says the other half of the country are child groomers, and then the other half of the country says that the red half are child abusers over the question of trans kids, quote unquote.
I don't know. I have a feeling, Willie was alluding to this before. I have a feeling
normal.
that these... Yes, I have a feeling that these things repeat itself. Okay, I'll give you this example, Dave. I know this is not necessarily what you were talking about, you know, like specifically, but back in, let's say, Imperial Russia, if you read, I believe it was, I think it was Anna Karenina, where Tolstoy was writing about how this one guy would, this one Russian nobleman would wake up in the morning and he would read his specific newspaper, never the other one. He always read this specific one that garnered to his specific tastes, and he knew that when he read it, he was going to receive all the information that he already knew. He knew what this was going to tell him, but he enjoyed that. He enjoyed the feeling of wanting to be right. And there were a lot of various things, the fucking Civil War, for instance, there were various things going on in history where people felt very divided. And I don't think it's anything new.
Fucking constantly. Like, if you think this is the most divided the country's been, you're fucking insane, dude. Just look at the fucking history, man.
You may understand a key political difference between Tsarist Russia and our system, right? That's the benefit of monarchy, is that you don't give a shit about how your country is.
No, you're wrong, because that's what screwed it up in the first place. That's why we got communism in Russia. I mean, I'm sorry to budge in here, but that's, I think, the key part. Because the government of Russia, Imperial Russia, was so fucking inflexible, because there was this feeling among not only the serfs that were freed, but also among of the minor upper class people, that something is incredibly wrong here, something is incredibly unfair. I'll give you one example. In the early 20th century, there was a famine which was naturally made in Russia. It was naturally made because there were people who had loads of grain, who were the nobility, who were shipping that grain overseas. Meanwhile, it was the United States, because we have actually a culture that gives a shit, it was the United States that was sending grain to Russia in order to help alleviate this famine. But
what year was this?
I believe this was very, very early 20th century, if not very late 19th century.
It had to be like the early, 1900s, right?
Yeah,
So this
no,
is
late
this is
1900s.
before World War One and Tsarist
Oh yeah,
Russia?
yeah. Before that,
Okay.
I think this is around the war with Japan. But my point here is that there was a lot of grievance that people felt. Same thing with a lot of grievance that people felt in pre-revolutionary France. And when a system is so inflexible that the only choice that people are left with is to create a revolution, that's when things really get bloody. And that inflexibility comes around from not having a separation of powers, from not having an ability to have some kind of a, some new people, some new blood coming in, maybe not coming in through the traditional route.
Well, it came in through Stalin, and
No, Stalin was way later.
No, I mean, what do you mean? It was like 20 years later? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I mean, like 20 years later is not way later in my book.
Well,
he was a direct consequence of the specific period you're talking about.
Yeah.
And there's no way that you can hold a country together as divided as Russia without some kind of very, very powerful central authority. Because if they don't, that country is going to split apart. And, I don't know, we're a long way away from that right now in America. But the process of this division is going to have huge consequences from our ability to operate liberally. Once half of the country thinks the other half of the country should be in jail, how are you going to have liberalism function?
I mean, dude, honestly, I think like half this what's it called? What is it called? The way people speak. What is that called? Like, I don't know. Literature, verbal, the way we verbalize shit. The reason why it's so fucking crazy right now is because of the internet, right? You have like, if you want something to be heard online, which is where everybody's talking, you have to fucking say it in the most volatile way possible. If you fucking hate Donald Trump, you say he goes to jail. If you hate Hillary Clinton, you say she belongs in prison and you're going to put her ass in jail, right? None of it ever fucking happens because everyone's talking shit, but that's just how it is because every mainstream media outlet has to compete with every fucking no-name YouTuber like me or you posting videos too, because we're going to use the most volatile title to get views. And so, of course, they have to then as well, Like, so I think it's kind of natural that.
Okay, but you're absolutely right. Initially, what was
so you're saying we're going to build up to
Let me finish. Initially, this country, after the 60s, when the division started, this country was held together because the mainstream media just controlled all the information. Now that monopoly is essentially going away. But with this diversity of opinions, this is not causing the division, it's exposing the division. The division was created by earlier conflicts, largely coming out of the 60s, and it exacerbated over time. What the internet did is it said, well, without the total domination of places like CNN controlling the center, we're going to expose how different you really see the world. It's so different that you can't even agree on how to teach children who are 5 about relationships without one side calling the other side child abusers.
That is fucking interesting, honestly. That's an interesting way to word it. I got to think on that. I do like that. Is interesting, though.
And by the way, the famine, for the people in the chat who were saying 30s, no, this is the Russian famine of 1891 to 1892. So people have not heard about that famine, and there was a very big effort, a relief effort on behalf of the United States to help them out. Meanwhile, a lot of these rich Russian nobility people, they just wanted to get richer, so they just sent their grain overseas while their own people were starving. Yeah.
No, go on.
No, well, that's the big reason why I look at a country like Russia. The way that its government was set up, I think it needed more time in order to transition into, let's say, it was close to being what it could have been, in a much better way after the first revolution of 1917, where they had this kind of like parliamentary system in place, like the Duma. And then after that came came Lenin and Trotsky and screwed everything up. So there were certain opportunities where it could have gone the other direction. I don't believe in this whole thing, well, some people are just, always going to be like this. I think at the same time, I do think
do you believe that about Afghanistan? Like, if we just given them more time, they would have been able to, make this democracy thing work. To me, I've become increasingly convinced that there are just it's not that the people are like worse. It's just that the situation they're in with the radical cultural divisions in the country and the radical divisions that occur between tribes and regions, and the lack of trust, those situations are not amenable to democracy. So it doesn't matter how long you give Afghanistan, it will never be amenable to democracy, because no one party will ever be able to trust the other party with power when their back is turned. And if you can't have that trust, you can't have democracy.
I mean, dude, it's like asking for democracy to just like happen naturally. Like the way it happened even in England is like such a bizarre, scuffed situation where it was like because of the fucking plague, the black plague or whatever it was fucking called, right? Like there was such a lack of workers. People started to pay peasants to leave to come to them and work on their farms more and more, right? So then it like slowly started from there. Like, dude, it's like an
I'm not so sure. I think
the
emergence of democracy really came from the Reformation. And in England, it came with Oliver Cromwell, who was a crazy. I mean, he ruined Oliver Cromwell. I mean, thank God his reign was so short, but he was the first democratic leader. I mean, he's a democratic dictator, essentially. But I think he almost ruined the country. He certainly ruined half of the art. He certainly ruined most of the folk art in England. And had there not been a restoration of monarchy, I think that England would be a cultural wasteland right now.
I can answer your Afghanistan question. So with Afghanistan, I don't think it's right to look at it and say, well, can they or can they not have democracy? I think democracy is something that happens after you would first have to have a high enough civilization. And in order to have a high enough civilization, I think it comes down to, for example, what are the kind of values that the parents would pass on to their kids. And there are certain things like, Lord Miles had a fun time in Afghanistan. He met, the Taliban people. And I'm sure there were certain very romantic things there that go on, like an honor-based society that people may look back on and say, oh man, I wish we had that. But at the same time, I think that it's wrong for people to assume that some people are just like in this one state. They're always going to be in this state. Again, I look at North Korea versus South Korea, for example. And South Korea, that was the result of the United States for a pretty big extent. Like, do you think that was... I don't want to do like one of these gotcha questions, but in general, like, I think that it was a good thing that the United States was able to reach out and to help South Korea and to turn South Korea into what it is today, with all the problems that it has, 8 goddesses, whatever. But you see my point, right? Like, there was this lending that America gave to South Korea, which I think did shape it into being more civilized.
Yeah, I mean, South Korea's democracy is pretty young, and it essentially exists as a protector of the United States. But I'll make it simpler for this. I agree with you, but I don't like this higher civilization. It's too vague for me. To me, it's actually way, way easier to quantify this. There's just one metric that determines whether liberalism, well, not one, but the most important metric, the one that is the most lacking, frequently the most lacking is, how much do people trust promises? How much do people trust promises from each other? How much do people trust promises from their abettors? How much do people trust promises? And how much value is there ethically in the morals that children are raised with to tell the truth and to keep your promise? That, politically speaking, is what determines how able you are to do this sort of power sharing thing. Now, I mean, there's a lot of different ways this can break down. It can break down individually, like individually people aren't trustworthy. But I would say in something like Tsarist Russia, I think individual people were very trustworthy. I think it was just the country was so far flung and divided, and there are so many little ethnicities that sort of collectively there was no trust in between groups, and that's what made it very, very difficult to run any other way than essentially an autocracy.
I would want Willie to comment on this. What I think is my biggest criticism.
Ask me to comment on this.
I want you to comment on this. What I think is my biggest criticism comes down to, while I agree it's good when people are able to trust each other, obviously nobody would say otherwise, I think the biggest criticism is the idea that people trust each other, outside of their family, let's say, but still like within their society, because they have this inherent sense of, trusting, as opposed to, if I don't trust somebody, or if I, let's say, steal something, then I'm going to have my hands chopped off. then I'm going to be punished in some incredibly severe way. I don't know if the right way to think about this is to say, like, we have to have these barbaric punishments or these old school ways of handling the problems. I think that's not the case, because a lot of the people who, let's say, come from the Middle East, who go into, I'm not talking about like the doctors and the scientists. I'm, specifically talking about like a lot of the military age men that make the trek over there that, are, let's say, like the lower rung of society. They unfortunately, they're used to living in a very law-abiding environment with a very harsh kind of law. When that harsh law is not there anymore, there's nothing to stop them from a lot of the unfortunate things that we've seen. And I don't think that's the best way of going about life. For example, I think if I were to go into South Korea, I don't think people would act a certain way at that point because they're afraid of, oh my God, what if I get caught, or what if somebody chops my hand off? I think in general it's just already been cemented through the kind of education that they had, through the kind of influences that they had growing up with their parents, that they wouldn't even think of doing that. And that, I think, separates the more primitive societies of Russia, let's say, that used to exist with the serfs, and South Korea or Japan.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I kind of lost my train of thought here. Your example was that people would trust each other more. I think you have it backwards, right? Because the harshness of punishment is needed because people are more violent and more rebellious. If, for instance, I'm the death, you'd probably be against the death penalty in our current society. But if I were to send you back to the Middle Ages, if you didn't use the death penalty against people who were rebelling against the state, your head would be on a pike.
Of course.
I mean, there wouldn't be enough jails to put all of the dissenters in, and people wouldn't believe that, because the dissenters would get into jail and their friends would murder you and take them out of jail, right?
No, Stalin would have been a great leader for a certain period of time. Like certain leaders, you could say, if you transported them to the 13th or 12th century, they would have been exactly what the doctor ordered. But that's the whole idea. We're not living at that time anymore, and these things change. I mean, right, Willie? Like, you understand what I'm saying, right?
But as you're doing the mistake, we didn't live in those times in the 20th century, but we could be going back to something that's more similar to those times in the 20th century. History is not a unidirectional process. When our societal trust was very, very high and the order in our society was very, very high, we could get away with having very light punishments and in very liberal society. But as that morality and that trust drains away, harder measures necessarily have to come in, otherwise the society descends into chaos.
Look, can I bring this back to fucking a YouTube thing?
Bring it back.
All right.
Bring the beat back.
Like when it comes to like people lying or being trustworthy or whatever, right? It ultimately comes down to like, what can they really gain if they lie in this situation, right? We just had a really fun drama with John Swan, where this fucking guy was like, he lied about Dream, right, to get out of a fucking thing. And a lot of people gave him the benefit of the doubt in that situation because it didn't seem like he had that much to gain through lying, right? But because he's in that position of power, the fact that it's proven that he was lying ended up hurting him a lot. What I guess what I'm trying to get at here is like, when it comes to like people like in trusting them, I think you're genuinely going to trust almost all people until you realize like, oh, they have something to really gain out of this. Like, nobody trusts a politician.
Yeah.
The instant you say you're a fucking politician or like a mayor or some shit, everyone fucking is like, oh, well, this guy's full of shit. It's like half the time, because you're willing to just say whatever to get elected, like free healthcare, like shit we've been hearing for years. Like, what is it? Fucking nobody's gonna have to pay for college. We've heard that for fucking ever. And it's never going to be a thing because they'll just say whatever they want to get elected, right?
Well, that can't be a thing, right? I mean, that's unless you decrease the price of college somehow.
I have no idea how that could, like, as somebody that thinks, okay, that sounds fucking, this is how I feel with like most democratic shit, right? I think like that sounds fucking awesome, but how's that even fucking possible? Like, I don't even understand how that can exist.
It's not possible from, I mean, I don't know, at least with the ordinary understanding of how money printing works, that doesn't seem like it could
Do you
possibly
know
be the case.
who fucking, what's his name? Something Yang, Andrew Yang.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Where he was like, universal basic income, right? We'll just give everybody like X amount of dollars a month. I wondered, like, I sit there and I go, like, how the fuck is that even like realistic?
Well, it's
can
on
you bribe
paper,
your
it would
way
work
to a
if you
fucking
cut.
election by being like, hey, I'll pay you fucking $2,000 a month?
It would work
Can you
on
just vote for
paper
me?
if you could cut government programs, but nobody can. So it's immaterial. Most of the spending government does is simply just printing money, which is, we're feeling the consequences of that right now.
Yeah.
And we essentially had a dry run on what, the government is giving people money looks like for 2 years during COVID, right? And you see the consequences, right? The supply chain gets degraded, inflation goes up. This is what happens when you print more money than there are goods in the economy. And I mean, it's been predicted, but it's popular via the democratic process. I don't know. We have a long way to fall, because if you look at the trust that Americans had in their government and in their countrymen 100 years ago, it was very, very high. And it's been going down and down and down since the 70s, basically.
I mean, but like 100 years ago, there was way more turmoil and like fucked up shit than there is now, you know? You had like the mobs fucking running everything. Like it was all sorts of shit. You had like fucking Jim Crow and all this stuff. Like
yeah, you had Jim
you're
Crow.
talking about people that literally couldn't even fucking vote realistically. You know, so of course maybe the country looks more united.
You're talking about voting to the wrong person. I don't give a shit whether people vote or not. If that gives you a better outcome, fine. But
if somebody's able to vote, right? Like not able to vote, surely that's going to play a role in like how united the country is.
There were more people able to vote in 1920 than there are people able to vote in 2020.
How? I don't understand that.
Like the amount of education and health that there was in 1920 was way higher.
No, but that's different than the amount of people voting. You're talking more
about
informed.
I thought you said the amount of people. We have more people voting now, but I don't give a shit whether more people vote.
Yeah. No, okay, there is something, if I could be the man in the middle over here, there is something that I could grab from what Dave is talking about when it comes to, if you think of that ancient Greek critique of democracy being that it leads to mob rule. The idea that the tyranny of the majority, that is what we've got to avoid. And when you have a bunch of very, dumb people who are not well educated, people who are educated by an education system that doesn't give a shit about whether they're educated or not, that treat it as just like some kind of a, kindergarten. When you have enough people who are of that mindset, who are then given the choice of who to vote for, that's not great. So it would be better theoretically if we would have people who were better informed about their politics, better informed about the direction of the country.
Well, that's why you have like representatives and terms and stuff, right? That's exactly why you don't have just every policy people go vote on.
Yeah, that's a part of it. I think Dave would take it further, right? Like, Dave, what would you say would be the kind of system where we can at least ensure certain amount of stability and ensure that people who were to vote would have, let's say, a certain intellectual level? What would be the best way of saying this? Because intellectual isn't anything either.
Right? This is not a consistent answer across time. In Afghanistan cannot be run stably as a power sharing system. That can't happen. America used to be able to be self-governing, and I think it's rapidly losing that ability.
What do you mean by that? Just so I can understand.
It's people are more dependent. They trust each other less, and they're increasingly reliant on the bureaucracies that they're supposed to control.
The bureaucracies being like the government, like these. Like,
the government, yeah.
Like,
I mean, so for instance, like exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you have, a people can control a government if the people are outside of the government, but if the people are dependent on the government, then it becomes this whole self-closed loop, right? That there can be no government based on dependence in that way. It's like when the government controls the media or the media controls the government basically chooses the terms for its own re-election and its own vindication. And so the whole thing becomes a giant loop.
Real quick, this guy SP in the chat had to like censor the word Jim Crow by using a 0 as the. Is that a fucking thing on YouTube where you?
I don't think so.
Jim
You
Crow.
could just say Jim Eagle, right, or whatever.
This fucking poor fucking YouTube, dude. Like,
See how far we've fallen? Yeah.
We can't talk about like a fucking Jim Crow thing without somebody having to censor shit.
By the way, Glasscake is going on the offensive on Dave. So Glasscake says over here, the self-perpetuating bureaucracies that you are trying to empower further. So that would be... and before that, UBI will accelerate inflation and ultimately continue the transfer of wealth and property we are currently witnessing. And one last thing in the beginning here.
I agree with that second.
All right. Well, this first one... Again, you're probably not going to agree with. So let's preemptively erode our rights from the top down just in case things get rocky. But to be fair to you, Dave, you do not advocate for this. You're basically saying that this is kind of an inevitability, right?
Yeah, essentially. I mean,
all right.
The thing is, what needs to radically happen is someone needs to get rid of our bureaucracy, starting with the university systems, and then carrying down to these institutions, these bureaucratic institutions. If these aren't removed, they will eventually erode away our rights, and then we will end up with an autocracy. Just through that process, right? It's like a gangrenous leg, right?
Eventually, Dave on that to a degree. I absolutely agree with Dave on that to a degree. Because these universities, you have like all these fucking people, which this is fucking insanity to me, right? That legitimately think shit like free speech is like a bad thing. You know, because somebody's feelings can be hurt by, you know, by like a fucking mean tweet or some shit, right? It's fucking insanity. So I totally agree with him on terms of like these universities are putting ideas into fucking kids where they think like, yeah, no, shit like free speech, that's a bad thing. That's actually against human rights. Where I'm like, bro, what?
Well, and again, this is why I think that there will be a lot more WillyMacs in the future rather than people who are just like, okay, here's the thing. If I were to go back in time and look at, for example, the Rush Limbaughs of the world and people who would be more in this conservative right sphere, they would have certain things that you, Dave, would agree with, but I would disagree with as far as like they would probably be against gay marriage. You know, they would probably be, I don't know, like you name some kind of a liberal thing, but that does not encroach on the rights. And I understand the slippery slope argument, which you've talked about a lot, where it comes to, well, first this gets passed, and that gets passed, and that gets passed. I think it is important, though, to, at least for the people who I think have a lot of common sense, to distinguish when it comes to things that, let's say, two men want to do, as far as, let's say, if one of them is in the hospital, then the other one, being their husband, would be able to, you know, be there for them, and then some legal way. I'm not exactly sure how it works,
gay marriage is a great example.
All right.
The whole
a great example of what, real quick? Just so
it's a great example of how like the victim group expansion carries over to political power. And that is like on the face of it, just looking at it from a policy point of view, gay marriage is like no big deal. But the problem is that it demonstrated how you could generate an enormous amount of power, both inside activist organizations, inside federal bureaucracies, and inside political coalition building by essentially redefining words and creating victim groups out of lifestyle choices that would essentially be treated as civil rights victim groups.
You're saying like being trans is like a lifestyle choice.
Yeah, exactly. So originally civil rights applied to categories you couldn't choose, like race. But when we see the transformation of civil rights law into things like homosexuality, we're talking about things that are lifestyle choices. People can adopt.
The argument is
things.
that they aren't choosing, right? They want to, like, they're born in the wrong body or whatever, right?
And that's the argument, but it rarely stays that way, right? You can see people just things like genderqueer. These things are obviously invented ideologies. I mean, who knows, right? Ultimately, who knows if we choose anything, right? Like my genes could have predicted what I like to eat, right? So like I like to eat spaghetti. That could be my genes telling me that, right? But ultimately, the idea of protected classes, I don't like the idea, period. But insofar as it ever made sense, it only made sense as things that were sort of immovable.
By protected classes, do you mean classes that get special rights as opposed to other people? Or do you mean classes that just get normal everyday fucking rights, right?
So, okay, this is
should have everyday rights, but I don't think they should get like all this extra stuff. You get what I'm saying?
There was a legal regime change in the 20th century that introduced this concept of protected classes. Now, protected classes were areas of non-discrimination through the 14th Amendment that were owed a particular level of consideration. What the courts called it was a particular level of scrutiny. And this created this idea of protected classes so you could say like race is a protected class. So if an employer or if the government is suspected of discriminating against race, the court is owed a certain higher level of diligence than had they been accused of discriminating against, something like what clothes you wore, like you didn't wear a tie, right? And so they established this, I think it was sometime between the 30s and the 60s. Now, after civil rights, this protected class designation became a conduit for enacting equal opportunity. And what happens is these laws called disparate impact laws get passed, which essentially make it illegal to discriminate against these protected classes. But when this is filtered through the Equal Opportunities Commission, what this means is that the Equal Opportunities Commission has defined sides of this thing that they're looking for. So, for instance, if you do anything that indicates that you might be discriminating against African Americans, the Equal Opportunities Commission is going to come after you. And they're going to use the protected class designation already established in law in the 1930s to essentially make sure that you get hit with a civil suit that will totally destroy your company or will get most of the people in your government department fired, et cetera, et cetera. Initially, as it was conceptualized in the 30s, protected classes were both ways. White was equal to black. But how they effectively function in the present post-1990s way, protected classes almost only go in one direction. The ability for someone to put in a disparate impact suit against, as an African American plaintiff against a company, is way more likely than them doing it as a white person or as an Asian, because of how legal precedent has been set, because how the Equal Opportunity Commission sets the rules, and this has been, I don't know if you, I don't know how much you pay attention to abuses like this going on, but if you pay attention to, people who post this stuff online, you'll see abuses like this going on every day. People saying things about white people or Asians that you would immediately get fired for if they had some other race in the sentence, right? This is a staple of conservative belly aching. So this protected class regime is essentially the front end of a legal framework that extends through civil rights. So that's what I mean when I say protected classes. Sorry for the rambly explanation.
No,
well, I think fair enough.
Well, that part of it. I want to make sure, Willie, do you have any questions about that?
I mean, look, like the reality is, like, if I had questions, we'd be here for fucking 10 hours, right? This is concepts that are over.
But this is pretty interesting, right? Like, as far as
it is
learning about
interesting. I don't. But the thing is, like, I can't contribute a ton to stuff like this. Just
no problem.
I'm too stupid. I don't fucking know.
No. That's right.
It's hard. What's hard about the protected classes thing is that on paper it works differently than how it actually works. And the thing is that the way that, like, stupid there's sort of a, you know the meme with to use internet memes. Do you know the bell curve meme where, like, the people on the ends agree and the people in the middle don't agree? Well, if protected classes were a bell curve, you'd have the grug brain would be like, protected classes means you can discriminate against white people. And then, like, the middle of the curve will be like, actually, it's equal. It's for both sides of the race division. And the high IQ person will be like, no, because of the legal precedent and how the Equal Opportunity Commission sets its rules and how prosecutors decide to prosecute, it basically is the way the grug brains think it works.
There was this book about it, The Age of Entitlement, by Christopher Caldwell.
Grug brains. I've never heard that.
And by the way, Willie, You have to stop. You have to stop saying that you're stupid. When you are not, you are not educated. You are smart, but you are not educated. Meaning,
well, yeah, it's stupid. Is obviously every single person probably on the planet is smart in something. When it comes to this topic,
no.
I'm stupid.
Okay, I disagree because
what I mean.
no. Here's what I think is going on. I think that there are so many people out there who are educated, but they're stupid. Meaning they know how to memorize
Like they have
things.
no common sense.
Yeah, exactly. They know how to memorize things, and they know how to repeat those things to other people as if they're smart. But I think there's a lot more to being smart than just memorization and adopting like a certain worldview and backing it up just by the things that you've learned. I think that there's a lot more.
I'm wearing glasses right now. I got to be smart to see.
The same Nicholas Taleb's educated but idiot.
Exactly, Dave. So the one contention I would have is, whatever happens, I want to make sure. For example, I think one great thing that some people end up being gay, they end up falling in love, and they end up marrying with a man or a woman that they're falling in love with. They end up being together. They do no harm to anybody else. They're just there. And I don't see why we can't have the kind of system where, for example, if the man or the woman, the spouse is dying in a hospital somewhere, that they would not be able to have certain legal connections. Again, I am no expert on this at all. I mean, speaking about uneducated, but I know that there are certain legal connections that spouses would have that otherwise they would not be able to have. So in that sense, it just seems really dumb not to have some kind of a way that could be facilitated, which is why I am pro gay marriage. I just hope you understand, Dave, where I'm coming from here.
I understand that. I mean, there's certain fairness concerns that are important to. There's certain fairness concerns that are important to take on board, and I guess I don't have any. I guess to a certain extent, I come from California. I grew up in a very sort of pro-gay environment.
You fucking libtard.
And I grew up as a libtard. And the thing is that I was told there are some. I don't know. There's something about this process that is very, very that we weren't told. I mean, the issue is that we were told all throughout the 1990s that gay people just want to be left alone. They just want to have rights like everyone else. And, I don't know. I don't feel that that's the world we live in right now. I feel that the LGBTQ plus ideology dominates everything. It essentially tries to grab the microphone and it chokes out conversations we should be having over why people aren't getting married, why people aren't starting families, why fewer and fewer straight people are actually able to live the lives that their parents did and propagate the native peoples of this country. That's the important conversation around sex, not about LGBTQBTI.
I can't imagine a more boring fucking conversation than shit about sex. Like, it just seems so fucking lame. I don't even understand how this is a fucking rational conversation we're having. But dude wants to peg a dude. I can't imagine giving a fuck. Outside of the fact that I'm gonna like tease him, maybe I'll be like, what was his butthole tight? Like,
no, wait.
But shit on your dick.
Dave,
like,
but
that's
Dave,
about as big of a joke as I could think of. Who could give a fuck?
But Dave, if we're talking about the low birth rates, do you think that if they were to have been restricted in who they would have had sex with, then they would have just chosen to get married and have kids? Would that be
I don't care if they. I don't think gay people are going to get married and have kids. I think that we set up our society so that the most important thing is that you can hook up with the person you want to have sex with. And we haven't given any consideration to how do we get men and women to actually settle down with each other.
Sure, but what does that have to do? But what does that have to do with gay people? Let them do whatever they are going to do. That's besides the point. I understand that we have to focus on building families.
I don't know. I'm like,
stop me.
Do you think this is a big? I don't think it naturally has anything to do with gay people. I think that what it's the common cause of our focus on homosexuality is being good. And the common cause of that and the low birth rates is we've decided that the most important thing about sex is the consenting adult having pleasure. That's not the most important thing about having sex. The most important thing about sex is that it produces new families. That's the most important thing about
Hold
sex.
on, I'm
Because
gonna.
if you're engaged in a sex that does not in any way produce more families or encourage people to form more heterosexual families, it is by definition less
I mean, do you
important.
not have sex with condoms, Dave? How many kids you got?
I have one child. I'm Catholic,
Yeah,
so we
exactly.
aren't
So you
against birth
got to be
control.
wearing condoms at some point, bro. Otherwise, you'd have 4 different fucking wives, right? Like, I mean,
Well,
come on, dude. You know, fucking most
I
people
don't know
have
how
sex to
that gets you extra
reproduce.
wives, but it could be.
Like, if I were to fucking
Well, if you
suck
were a
dick,
Mormon.
right? It's just for fucking pleasure. Like that is the
But
majority
that's
of the reason people have sex. Kids are just like the byprocess of not having
Yeah.
protection.
that is a new attitude.
I mean, look at
By
the
the
third
way.
world, for instance. Well, here's where I would disagree, Dave. Look at the third world.
The third world, you'd have a million fucking kids because you didn't
Yeah.
have a tractor to farm your fucking field, right? So maybe that's the only thought process behind having.
No,
kids.
not only
You
that,
some-
but right now, I wonder like how much would people appreciate in third world actually maybe having more access to contraception, just because like a lot of people are going to have a lot of sex because sex is fun. People like sex. I'm not sure if I agree with you, Dave. This idea that everybody was just like focused on just family, like I'm gonna have sex, I'm gonna have a family and raise kids. I mean, that was
Life
part of
used
it.
to suck balls at the beginning of time, right? The one pleasure they probably had was fucking getting it off.
So what do you? The thing is that we have had a precipitous, the post-sexual revolution countries, the countries that have gone through a sexual revolution that refocused. So I think it's indisputable that if you talk to our grandmothers, they saw sex as an extension of marriage and family formation. But if you talk to people of our era, we see sex as being sort of autonomous. It's an individual choice done, for whatever reason you want. Now, this is an obvious change in attitude that we call the sexual revolution. Now, it's obvious that every time we've done this experiment, right, post-sexual revolution societies have massively lower birth rates than pre-sexual revolution ones, measurably. So there's this enormous amount of evidence from various countries going through this transition
your
in
life
thought.
gets, and the more rights women have, the lower birth rates there are.
But this is what's funny. They're not happier. People are lonelier, and their self-reported happiness is not higher. In some cases, it's lower.
I find that incredibly. I can't look. I have no answers to that because I find that incredibly interesting. I've watched a lot of videos talking about that stuff.
Do you think people are
It's
lonelier?
fucking remarkable, right? Because life is
Yeah.
better than ever, but people are more lonely and depressed than ever. So
I mean, you get to when you're
that's
40 and you don't have a
fucking bizarre to
family.
me, yeah.
Like,
Yeah, because there's also less to prove yourself with in a way. Like if there's less pressure that you have to fight against, I mean, it's understandable. That is like a very common, decline of the West type argument. What I would though add here is that if we were to look at the people you mentioned, Dave, who were talking about how they viewed sex, what age would they be asked this question? And part of me wonders, when that grandma was in her, early 20s, was she thinking about it in the same way, or was she just as horny as a lot of people today are, and just kind of, like there was a different way of going about it maybe? But I know I'll give you this example. There was this guy I knew, this TV director. He was born in like the beginning of the 20th century. He directed episodes of what was that? The Twilight Zone. He directed that episode, the one with that kid who can send people into the cornfields. Do you remember that one, Dave? Yeah. So he talked about
the cancel culture.
Yes, exactly. So he talked about how back in the day, I mean, maybe you could say, well, this is just like the degenerate studio system, whatever. But he used to talk about how it was so free. Like he used to just go and he saw this one woman, they just talked for a bit, and then they went upstairs and they just had sex. And this is like back in the nifty 50s where it was considered to be very conservative.
But this is when they first introduced birth control. So this is like you're catching the front end of this phenomenon in the 50s. In the 50s, it was great because people didn't know what it would entail, right? If you were a high-paid Madison Avenue kind of guy in the late 50s, you would have tons of sex with women because women would be on birth control. They would be. You were a high-quality mate, and nobody had any understanding where this would lead. But people don't have that experience anymore.
But it's not a
even in New York.
moral. But it's not a moral thing, though. What we're talking about really here is technology. We're talking about the ability for people to do something they otherwise would have had very serious repercussions for doing. I don't think that would make the people back then moral. I think that would just make them, you know, like, again, it goes back to this idea of, like, do you act a certain way to others because you're a friend, they're going to chop your hand off, or do you do that genuinely? And I think that there is a difference there, and I think it's an important one, because on one hand, a person is just kind of being, you know, redirected, like, act this way or else, and on the other hand, a person genuinely feels that way and chooses not to act. I mean, that's kind of like that big thing in Clockwork Orange, right?
But my answer is the same, though. This is what you're missing here.
Okay.
Is that when you talk about capital punishment in the Middle Ages, or you talk about the punishment that was threatened against people who offended against traditional sexual norms pre-1950s or pre-birth control, you're talking about necessary survival steps that had to be put into place, because if you don't do that, your society starts falling apart. And so once we relax these regulations, what would eventually happen is we're now in a situation where our society is going. I mean, a society that has a 1 child per woman birth rate will die. There's no question about it. It will die, and our society is dying statistically, and it's slowly being replaced by demographics.
How is it dying statistically?
Okay, so this is just simple math. If you have less than 1 child, listen.
You did not describe it as simple math.
Yeah, it's simple math here. If you have a society where each woman has 1 or fewer children on average over the course of their lifespan, that means that every generation, which is about 30 years, the population halves.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you're saying
you know from math what happens when you have and have and have and have and have. It's the same thing as doubling. Your population disintegrates very, 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 very quickly.
Yeah.
It's called exponential decay. It's the inverse of exponential growth.
So you only got 1 fucking kid. So you're the problem. What the fuck, Dave?
So but how many kids do you have, by the way?
Ooh, gotcha there.
Let's not go there. Let's not go there.
You know, so but the point is statistical, right? The society that encourages people to have kids, if it gets significantly below replacement, it will destroy itself, as our society is heading towards. Mm-hmm. And it will be replaced by other societies that don't have these regulations. This is what I'm saying by being a political realist on the right. You can use loose regulation if your society is moral and trusting enough to not need it. But if you loosen your regulations and people do bad things and you don't correct those bad things, eventually those bad things will destroy your society and you will be forced to use hard-handed measures, or you'll just go extinct. That's the same thing from people rebelling against causing chaos politically with capital punishment, as it is with the population simply replacing itself by having, on average, more than 2 children.
I have so many questions because a lot of this shit is interesting, right?
Sure.
I have some shit. I guess like the first one, you said society replacing itself. Like, what do you mean by society replacing itself? Do you mean like a different power taking over as the world leader, or do you mean like what does that entail?
Society replacing itself means that you're not going to have yourself every generation. Do you mean like what will happen? How will they get
I don't know what that means. How do I envision like all right, there's half the people that exist every generation because
I could give an example.
But what will happen is that immigrants will be brought in.
The real world?
2 possibilities. One is that immigrants will be brought in and they'll take over because they'll have to, because there'll be no more native population to contest.
But aren't they part of society?
They're part of society, but they don't operate under the same rules. And the same thing is, the other thing is you'll just get invaded, as the Roman Empire did when they had this happen to them, 1,500 years ago.
Did you just use invaded? What's that mean?
Invaded.
The Roman Empire 1,500 years ago had a population collapse similar to the one that we're experiencing now. And barbarians just came in and murdered them all.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know if that
Well, I could
can happen
give
in
an
the modern
example,
world,
by the
but-
way, kind of going to what Dave was talking about earlier with Islam, as far as I understand. And again, I'm no expert on Islam, but from the Muslims I've spoken to and from the books that I've read, it's not called Sharia law; it's called fiqh, the Muslim system of law, and it's not something that you just like take a page out and just like cut it out. Like, it's something that's been passed down from master to disciple. And you could say that today in the West, like, a lot of Muslims are not that serious about it, but let's just, like, imagine that a lot of them were serious. The Muslim birth rate is very high. So what I could imagine would happen, again, if they keep sticking with the Quran...
Be right back.
Okay. If they keep sticking with the Quran, is that they would pass on certain things, from master to disciple, from one generation to another, and they would have this quality of following these very specific rules, acting in this very specific way. But again, my issue is that, and this is something that Counterpoints was also talking about. He was in Iraq. He was in the army there. That would be great, by the way, a conversation to have you in Counterpoints. But anyway, he was, again, pointing to this thing where he sees a lot of the ways that they go about their society is they're not doing certain things because inside they feel like it's the right thing, but just because this is something they have to do it or else. It's something that is part of the law. And
Sure.
maybe there's a certain gradient where you could say one transitions into another. And by no means am I saying like they're doomed to only being in that kind of state. Again, I think like everything is very flexible. Now that WillyMac is here, I'm going to say that one more time. And by the way, everybody who's watching this, subscribe right now for WillyMac's going problem. Hopefully not a growing problem.
Alcoholic. Fucking sub.
Yeah, so anyway, what I was saying to Dave earlier is that while I don't think that there's some kind of like I said before with the North Koreans and South Koreans, there's no, fate that any peoples have, because I think peoples are very flexible, peoples change from one generation to another. But in general, as far as like the laws that the Muslims follow, there are certain things they're allowed to do, there are certain things they're not allowed to do. You could say same thing with like the Hasidic, like the traditional ultra Orthodox Jews. So there are certain things that they are allowed to do and not allowed to do. This gets passed on, and they have a lot of kids. What happens as a result is they would, technically speaking, if Dave is right, be at least the majority if we're talking about Europe. They would be the majority in Europe if they're following these laws and having a lot of kids. But again, my issue there is I don't know if it works this way that you're following a particular law, that this is why you're being good to somebody else. The kind of level of civilization I'm personally after, and when I say civilization, I mean just like the way that people act with other people, is that they would not hurt somebody because they would, that they would be against the law. They would not hurt somebody because when they would hurt somebody, when they would betray somebody, they would feel on the inside as if they've betrayed themselves. Like, that's the ideal.
But if you want that as a result, you have to make sure that people do that. The people who have that attitude in their culture, you have to make sure that they are the ones that are replacing themselves of their generation. If they get replaced by people who don't act that way, then you're not going to have that kind of highly ordered society you want.
Maybe we're going into a David Goliath thing. By that, I mean, this is just a guess. Like South Korea, I keep going back to South Korea, but South Korea, it's automating a lot of its thing. There's a lot of robots there. This thing in Europe that they have where they talk about, oh my God, like there's so few people, we need to import migrants. South Korea doesn't have that problem. Why import migrants? We'll just have robots do this stuff for us. And at that point, if there are, and maybe this is too transhumanist of me, I don't know, maybe you could say peak oil's coming, whatever, but maybe what could happen is we could have a smaller kind of population, and maybe at that point people would be able to have kids.
That is really
because
fucking interesting too. Yeah, Dave, what do you think about?
So how is this going to work? Again, Lev, you're going to have a rapidly decreasing population and no immigration.
Well, I mean, you will have immigration, right? For sure.
Okay, so if you have a declining population and immigration, the immigrants are going to be your new generation, not the natives. The natives are dead at that stage. You can just ignore them.
No, we're not talking immigration now. We're talking robots.
Robots. Okay, well, then the robots are your new generation, so forget about people.
I mean, surely there will be both, but yeah.
Here's why I disagree with Dave. And Dave, I understand where you're coming from. And look, you may be right. I'm not saying that this has been 100%, this is me doing the robot. This has not been 100% thought out. But allow me to introduce you to this idea of people where there are fewer of them and a lot of robots take care of creature comforts. Maybe now would come the time that the people that are there are going to think about how can we transcend a lot of the problems that we've had before. How can we actually be people of good values and pass those good values on to the kids that we are going to have? And we're going to have those kids not because we want like an extra farmhand, but because we want like the next generation of people who we are going to introduce to certain difficulties, certain struggles for them to overcome, so they would be able to maintain a high level of civilization. Like, I think these things can be thought through. And I think that there's going to be if this is possible, I don't think it's going to come from the masses. I think it is going to come from certain people who are in the kind of position to kind of think of these kind of things to come into fruition. But hey, look, the society is right in front of us. And I, for one, am not going to sulk about what is not working. I want to figure out ways to make it work. So
how did you do that? Because if we can figure out a way to do that, I'm all ears, right? But if your plan for doing that is just to have the native populations of Western countries die away and be replaced by Africans, I don't think it's going to produce that result.
Well, first of all, that has nothing to do with what I was saying at all. And when you're talking about Africans, again, it's like, I am not talking about one people going to another place or vice versa. I don't care about that.
That's happening, right?
Yeah, but that's not my point. Because what I care about as far as immigration, let's say if we're talking about Africans, I personally see no problem like with the Nigerians that come in and they're super well educated and they're super smart. But that's even besides the point. That's not what I want to dwell on. The important part right now that I'm saying is that forget immigration entirely. Immigration as a whole, I see as being the David in this David Goliath story. What I mean by that is you can have a lot of people coming in, and a lot of these people would not be that educated. They would come from a different culture. That does not mean at all that given enough time, those people would not be raised with the right values. Those people would not be able to ascend to a higher level. I definitely think they can. I never put any walls between that. But what I would say, though, is that if we take the immigration aside, before we take the immigration aside, if we look at the immigration of people who are from, let's say, a very different culture, a culture that may not have our same kind of ideals, the same goals it wants to reach, then yeah, that's kind of a problem. Which is why I'm saying let's not focus on the immigration. Instead, what we should focus on is with the people who are here right now. Let's try to get them to as high of a level as possible. And let's not discriminate against who is going to want to get to a higher level.
Do you feel that's being done currently?
No, I don't think that's being done at all.
I don't think that's being done either.
But that doesn't mean...
I think that's being done worse now than it was when I was born. So over the 30 odd years I've been on this planet, it's markedly decreased.
No, as far as education, I don't think it looks great right now at all. But again, this is where the hockey puck is right now.
You see where my worries begin then.
Of course.
Right?
No,
it's not
Dave,
happening through birth rates. It's not happening through
there is no denying that a lot of your worries are pretty valid. But as far as the solutions go, I am completely against the dictatorship. You know that. I'm completely, and you're against that too. But you see that as an inevitability. I do not. I think that we can figure out some way of going about this, and we can be very clever about it. And I don't think enough people are. I think more people do need to try to figure this out, which is why I think more conversations like this is important. All these nihilists here saying it can't be done, it can't be done. Willie, can it be done?
I mean, dude, shit. I mean, you guys always take it so far fucking above my head, right? I mean, I don't know. Like, I guess, Dave, what I do want to know, though, is, like, what do you think about, like, because the world is clearly heading towards, like, a place where AI and robots are going to, like, control the production of almost all goods at some point, like, sooner than later. What do you think about that, and how do you think that'll affect, whether it's the political landscape?
Well, there's two risks. The first risk is...
Because economically, real quick, it, of course, it'll be positive, right? because there'll be more goods being produced.
What was the question again?
What do you? Because you guys have touched on robots and AI essentially taking over almost all production in terms of consumer goods, right? So of course production levels are going to go way up because AI never needs to sleep. AI never has a day where it's working slow or has a headache or a sick day or whatever the fuck is going on, right? AI can't be controlled by COVID, right?
It will
So how do you
marginally
think that'll
increase
affect?
efficiency, yes.
So yeah, how does that affect the way economies work or militaries work or like that sort of shit?
So there's two AI threats. The first one is AI control. The second one is AI economic glut.
Can you
I'm going to
define
discount
both of
AI
those?
control, and I think you're talking about AI economic glut. The only solution I can say is that we essentially create jobs for people to do and create isolated economies so that people will live and work in their own lives inside human economies that
Do you mean,
coexist
like,
with essential technological economies.
I don't
Sort
know
of
what
in the
that
same
means,
way
though.
that
Explain
Orthodox
that.
Jews coexist, or the Amish coexist with modern society.
Okay, interesting. All right.
So it would be kind of like a more technocratic type of Amish, like a cyber Amish, if you will.
Techno Amish.
Well, I mean, don't laugh at this. I think that there's a whole. This is the problem with our current political discourse, is that there's so many interesting conversations that we're just not having that we need to be having. One example that I always like using is Israel, who is really interesting because they have this highly technological economy in the cities with shit birth rates, but their birth rate is astounding because what they do is they have their Orthodox population live in these low technology zones, have tons of kids, and then a few of their kids come and be urban bugmen and contribute to the economy, and the rest of the ones just they continue on in their societies and continue on the line and the faith and the cultural traditions. I mean, I think there's a lot of problems with how Israel does that, right?
No, Dave is 100% right about that.
That's a path for the future that if we learn from, we could improve on that model.
We should just fucking farm kids. Is what you're saying.
Yeah. No. Imagine this. Imagine there being this idyllic little village. Like an idyllic little village full of all these Amish, and then one day, a UFO comes and just takes some of the Amish.
So basically,
well, it's like
what you guys are
Stardust,
telling
right?
me is I haven't had a bunch of kids yet because I'm too smart. Is what I'm being told.
Well, that's Idiocracy. Do you remember that movie Idiocracy with Mike Judge?
I haven't seen that in fucking years.
Okay, so the plot. You remember the plot of it, right?
No, explain it.
All the smart people stop having kids because there's not enough time. They got to worry about their careers, and all the stupid people have more kids. And as a result, you're just stuck in this garbage heap of a planet Earth where all the buildings are falling down.
Them. You're you're stealing a couple away here and there,
No, but it wouldn't be the stupid kids. I guess from what I understand, Dave is talking about, with the Hasidic Jews, for instance.
In order to be sustainable, it would have to be a cross section, right? It would have to be a random sample. But like I said, Israel does not actually farm kids away from Orthodox families. Yeah. That just naturally happens due to osmosis.
Well, of course.
Yeah. And this is and so. Yeah. But if Israel did not have a sustainable birth rate of Jews, it would cease to exist. Their Arab populations would overwhelm them, and the country would disintegrate after they lost their Jewish majority. And so, it's essential for them. So that's forced them to essentially answer up front a lot of questions that most Western countries just don't want to answer because they're afraid of being called racist.
No, but Dave, I can handle the racist situation like so. When it comes to the Jews, you do have the Hasidic Jews who are Ashkenazi, but you also have Hasidic Jews who are Sephardic. You also have Jews who are Arabians. You have also Jews who are Ethiopians. So you have a bunch of different people, and for me, like I said before, it's not the people. People are flexible. It's more of what is the information that the people have in their heads that they pass on, and how well is the next generation able to retain that information. That's what matters to me. And I think
I don't think we understand the relationship between that yet. I don't think that we can say it's all just it's all just the
Yeah.
ideas. Doesn't matter who your parents were. I think that
No, but it
we don't
doesn't
really
even
know what the relationship
okay,
is.
sure. We could say again, I'm not going to be bad faith here. Like, we can say that we don't know exactly like all the nitty grittiness of it. So the only thing we can judge is what exactly does the person, and I keep saying this phrase over and over again, but what does the person bring to the table? Can you be a good judge of character and say, like, this person, regardless of where they're from, what exactly do they have to offer as far as their abilities, as far as their wisdom, and just judge according to that? I don't see why that is so fucking hard.
Well, you mean, can we do that in this country? It doesn't seem like we can, right? Because
No,
what happens
sure.
is that
I'm talking about the ideal.
standards
You're right.
themselves get politically pressured, right?
Yeah.
If we apply neutral I mean, you see this in the military. Like you saw this, I think, across last year, where like they open up some avenue for women, and they realize that the tests they have are failing all of their women. So like, well, let's modify the test, right? And so now the test for this combat role has been degraded because of this neutralization, right? So we haven't figured out a way to do this.
No,
right?
you're right. That's not great. But my point is not that this is what we have right now. My point is that when it comes to a lot of the racist, reactionary people, and again, I'm not conflating reactionaries are all racist at all, but I'm just saying, like, when it comes to the people who are more of that, further right side, I think that they have a tendency to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that, well, because these certain racial things are not being looked at, we're just going to go full racist now, and that's going to be the policy, where if you are not this person, then we're not going to let you in. My whole thing is just judge according to the deeds. Why is that? Why can't that be the position that people on that side adopt? Why is that a bad position?
Well, I want to be fair to the person you're criticizing who isn't here. And
it's not, but it's not one person. It's like a general.
Look, I agree with you in the abstract that we should always judge based on the individual. But in real life, it doesn't work like that. And the people who are, the nationalists that I think you're complaining about, they realize that in the real world, it doesn't work like that. And that if you don't use broad categorical things like no women in combat roles, eventually the standard itself gets degraded and you lose control over the situation.
Where I would say, I don't even know if it's meeting in the middle, where I would say the focus could be to address certain concerns that they have, because if we're talking about like one individual meeting another individual, if we're talking about like immigration, that's probably not going to work that way. But if we are judging according to the culture, like how the family acts, how the family relates to one another and people around them, I'll give you this example. When we were coming from the USSR, I think it was Russia at the time already, but when we were emigrating, this was like early 90s, like 93. It was a very hard immigration process. They were asking a bunch of questions, and I just think like having people in that position of judging whether or not some people can get into a country or not, I think certain things related to what is the overall culture can play a role, because you could have people coming from wherever, as long as they abide by a certain level of, a certain culture that fits into the culture of, I'm not even saying the U.S., but like any first world nation, then there wouldn't be a problem. And I know it's not an easy thing, but I'm just giving an alternative here to what I think is a very dark path as far as saying like, all of you people, because you happen to be looking like this, you're not welcome. That's what I'm against. So I'm giving a good alternative
country that's
here.
implemented a policy like that hasn't been that is not facing down demographic transformation in very short order?
I don't think any of the countries have implemented a policy specifically like that. That's kind of the point that I'm driving at here.
Well, okay, but a lot of them have said that they were going to do that, but they have just not done that.
Yeah, so society tends to be lazy. That's why we have to work on it.
So the problem is it's not just one country that's failed to do this. It's like America has failed to do this, England's failed to do this, France.
All right, first of all, I cannot speak to all the countries right now. I only know as much as I know about the United States. And I know that, Europe's not been doing that great when it comes to its policy. What I can say, though, is looking at a country like Poland, for example, they seem to be doing pretty well. I mean, they have a pretty healthy religion going on there, Catholicism. And why can't that be a better example to look at and say, what can we learn from Poland? What can we learn from some of the other Baltic countries around Poland? That may be a good medium.
I think if the conservative Poles had their way, there would be policies in place to make sure that their country maintained like an 80% Polish composition, if I'm not wrong.
All right. I mean, again, when we're talking about that, that's that policy, and maybe that is something that's going to enable Poland to succeed. I know that the United States has been through a very different history, so I'm not saying that every policy is going to be, exactly the same way for every single country. But the alternative that I outlined right now with judging according to the culture, at that point, what does it matter? If you can somehow show that the kind of culture that some group of people who's coming in has, if that culture of that specific family, if that culture of that specific family does match up, and it's very hard, and you make it very hard, but if it does match up, then I don't think there is this thing that creates a fifth column. What I mean by that is, if there is a sense of, I did all I could, I not only worked hard, because working hard is not enough. You can work as hard as you want, and at the end of the day, if you still don't measure up culturally, then you don't measure up culturally. But what if we're talking about somebody who is not just working hard, but is working smart, is able to show that I am embodying all the qualities of whether it's the United States or whether it's some other third world country. And
are you just saying that we're just going to let in like doctors and lawyers, and then otherwise we're going to have a restrictive immigration policy?
I wouldn't say just doctors and lawyers, because I'm not talking specifically about
we do have
profession.
a restrictive immigration policy. Isn't most of our immigrants coming from like educated people from Israel or India or Asia and shit like that?
In America?
Yeah.
No, we also
in America,
have a
most of our
system.
immigrants are coming from South America and Asia currently. And it's
okay.
not a
I
restrictive
got that
immigration
wrong.
policy. It's a pretty, historically speaking, it's a pretty open one.
Yeah, that's been since
And-
1965, 69 or 65.
65, the Hard
yeah.
Seller Act.
Yeah.
Right. So it's, historically speaking, and for most countries that aren't in a colonization phase, our immigration policy is fairly open, and it mostly comes from Asia and South America.
What is a colonization phase?
Colonization phase is where we're literally like displacing the population, like we did when we colonized the west of this country. Like we had a very, very high immigration rate between like 1865 and 1918, but that's because we were literally like moving the Indians into reservations and just putting people down in little settlements and across the West and in the Midwest as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's. I mean, there were a lot of things wrong with that. There were a lot of things that were okay with that. I'm not making a moral judgment, but if the country
what
grows,
happened, right? That's
yeah.
what
I mean,
you're
if the
saying.
country
That's
if the
just the shit
country
that
is
happened.
getting most of its population growth from immigrants, like your population is being changed radically,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what's happening in most European and Western countries. That's just a fact.
But would it necessarily happen in the same way if, for example, unlike having all those military-aged men who are migrating into Europe right now, or having people who do come from very different cultures migrating to the U.S., what if you did implement this policy, which I know some people tend to be scuffing at it like it's not going to change anything, but I do think that would be a very big shift. And at least it would be the kind of shift where, again, there wouldn't be this feeling of, I am at the same...
What are you going to do to someone who can't speak the language who shows up at the border? You're going to give them a test?
No. It has to be done much more professionally, obviously, so that's not going to work that way. Just showing
so
up at the border.
it's even harder than a test.
Yes. Harder than a
they have
test.
to throw a
You might
football.
as well turn them away at that stage,
Perfect
right?
spiral.
You might as well turn them away, because those huge groups of millions of people that show up at the border, none of them are going to be able to pass like this regimen of testing and interrogation, and none of them are going to be able to pass that.
Why do you think that?
Because a lot of them don't speak the native language.
Okay, well then that's a start. No, that is a great point you're bringing up here. Because number one, if we're talking about the ability for somebody to take the time to learn a language, I think that that is a very important quality to have. That's something that my family had to do. That's something, obviously, I had to pick up pretty instantly here in the States. But you would say... And
are you an immigrant?
Lev,
Yeah.
do you think these people who are arriving in caravans
From where?
are like? Do you think a significant percentage of them are like trilingual, college-educated people that have studied the host culture for years, and not only can they speak the language perfectly, they can also tell you like three kings of Poland?
No, Dave, hold on a second.
This isn't reality. This is like
I know. Hold on, Dave, hold on.
Case.
I think there's a big confusion. I think that you are putting in place of me, Lev. I think that you are putting in my place some kind of straw man character that would advocate for this caravan immigration in the first place. I don't. That's not what I was saying at all. What I was saying is when it comes to people going through the front door, going through the right steps like my family did in order to become an immigrant, then there would be very stringent and very specific things that would have to be done to prove that their culture would be compatible with the ideals that America or whichever country would hold itself to. I think that is absolutely fair. What I would say is the opposite of that is when you would specifically restrict immigration based on certain immutable genetic characteristics as whoever the hell would define them, because what happens then, I'll give you one quick example, okay? And this isn't specifically genetic, this is more cultural, but going back to my favorite subject, Imperial Russia, after the serfs were freed, there was still a caste system where if you were in the serf caste, you would only be able to be hired for a certain level of promotion, like a certain job.
Good old slavery plus.
Yeah, but after you get promoted a certain level, you're not going to be able to be promoted above that. That was just the rule. As hard as you worked, and not only as hard, but as smart as you worked, you could be like the most qualified, the smartest person for that job. But the fact that they did not let you in, that started to feed into this... what I'm trying to figure out the word here. Willie, help me out. What is the word for when a person feels something is being done very unfairly to them and they lash out? What is that word?
It's bullshit.
It's bullshit. I'll take that. That's fine. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit, damn it.
It's bullshit. So that is something that I think is completely stupid, while my proposition, and I know it's not something that's been fully fleshed out yet, but I'm at least kind of like leaning into this idea that something like that is possible. That's not bullshit. And that's why all these arguments about, well, what are you going to do with the caravans? You're going to give them tests? I have never talked about that at all. That is not something that I was talking about. So
you're talking about instituting a policy that will turn down the vast, vast, vast majority of people who try to immigrate to the country.
Yes.
Okay, well, in that case, I mean, sure, fine. If it's just
because it's fair. That's the thing. Because it's a fair policy. It's something where a person can be judged according to their merit. That's all I'm talking about.
I don't think that's not how it's going to be seen, right? Because you'll be turning a lot of people down because they're Muslim. You'll be turning a lot of people down because they don't have mastery over some archaic cultural element that's totally arbitrary. You'll be turning a lot of people down because they don't have a college education.
I don't think it's arbitrary at all. I think that, again, if we're talking about like a lot of the Asian countries today, if we're talking about Vietnam, South Korea, Japan, these came from different origin points. Yes, you could say that the Western culture kind of went in there and changed certain ways they did things, but at the same time, I think you'd be pretty safe living in those countries, give or take. And those are not the same cultures either, yet they are cultures that are pretty compatible. And I would say same thing to, highly educated people from Nigeria that come in here and kick ass on the tests. They would be completely compatible with the culture of cultures of the United States.
Kick ass on the test?
What?
I thought you said there was some kind of cultural requirement as well.
Yes. And okay, let me ask you this. So as far as the Nigerians go, culturally wise, as far as how they treat, their kids, child rearing, things like that. Maybe I'm wrong here, but
I don't know how you're going to evaluate people's child rearing tactics.
It's a tough one. I know it's a tough one, and I want to figure that out. I don't have the answer for you, but that's just like some of the things I'm throwing out here of something that could potentially be looked at. Look, I'm in the same boat as you. I want to figure out how to solve these problems, and I'm giving it my best shot here, at least throwing out an alternative to whatever's been proposed so far. And we'll see.
The thing is, at some point, it's just going to. At some point, whatever we say our justification is, it's going to involve just saying no to like 99% of the people who want to come into the country. That's what's going to result in, right? So if you're not comfortable saying no to all those people, then your pulse is going to get overturned, because no matter what standards you put in place, there'll be a criticism of them. They'll be restricting freedom of movement or something like that.
Yeah, but I think that those criticisms are bullshit, because again, this is not discrimination based on certain things that people have no control over. This is judging people according to... No, it's not. Why is it?
Because if we're operating in the real world, a guy who's born in Afghanistan does not have like the equal opportunity to become an assimilated English-speaking polymath who can pass a test and adhere to Western standards for child rearing.
No, but his kid can, absolutely, right?
Was kid in Afghanistan? Like
no.
Okay, not in Afghanistan, but
this is to get into America. That's the proposition, right?
Yeah.
So
Dave, we have plenty of examples of that going on. For example, there is one programmer I know, and again, it's like anecdotal evidence, whatever. It's still good.
Yeah, but we're talking statistically here, so like it's got to be the average, right?
Okay, if we're talking about this person I know, he is from Iran. Originally, his parents are from Iran. In Iran, it's not Afghanistan. It's slightly, higher in terms of, like the history and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But he is a fully westernized person. He does not care about the Ayatollah Khomeini one bit. And I think that there are many people out there who are of that same mentality, who do want to have a place, to raise their kids, if not in America, then in some other place where they would fit right in. And when you would see them at the cafe, there would be no difference between you and them as far as, speak to each other. There would be no difference between how your kids are raised, other than maybe, they like having Iranian holidays and Iranian food. But you see what I'm trying to get at here.
There's a certain level, right? Because this is when we take these people, these high achieving people, like this Iranian computer programmer.
Yes.
Like, why can't he just make Iran a better place? Iran's in a hellhole.
Why can't he make Iran a better place?
Yeah.
Dude, it's because they got a dictatorship, right? Like, if you fucking try to make it a better place, you get fucking burnt.
It doesn't matter.
They fucking take a drill to your head on top of like a rooftop and just fucking drill your brains out.
Iran is not Afghanistan. A. B, even if it was, the only way these countries get better is through motivated individuals working within them. Like, so, is this the solution that everybody who's sympathetic with the West from Iran, who's educated, is going to move to the West?
No, that's obviously not possible.
Okay, so some people who are sympathetic, who are educated, who are sympathetic with the West, are going to stay in Iran, and that's how it's going to get better, right?
I mean, dude, if the government is trying to be progressive and it's not just a selfish dictator trying to just live like the most lavish life possible, then sure. But I mean, it's hard with these places, right? It's a really slow thing.
The thing is that, like, first of all, there's two problems. The first one is that, despite what we say about it being everyone having an equal opportunity, the progressives are right about this. People don't have an equal opportunity, and if you put stringent standards that exclude 99% of the people and then say it's all equal, people are going to know it's not equal. I would just rather have us say it's not equal. We have a right to say no to people who want to immigrate to this country. It doesn't mean that you're worse. It doesn't mean that you failed some kind of meritocracy test. This country just wants to be the people who live here, and the other people can work to make their country a better place. At some point, we're going to have to work to make our countries better.
I mean, dude, the problem is, it's like, I'm trying to think, like, what is a good comparison, right?
No, but I just want to be...
when you have if you have a company, right? Mm-hmm. If your leadership sucks balls, the company will not do well. It just won't, right? It's the same thing with the country. If the leadership sucks balls and doesn't encourage people to stay and give these people like all these benefits and privileges for it, they just won't. Can
I ask you a question? So sure. Will the company be reformed if all of the highly motivated, highly skilled dissidents leave or stay?
I mean, stay, but ultimately the leadership needs to change.
How is the leadership going to change?
Either that motherfucker gets killed or they replace him. Yeah, some shit, man. Right? That's the only way, right? That's what's hard with these dictatorships.
Yeah. I see that our immigration policy is actually stabilizing. The corruption that we complain about in these countries is actually, it's being helped by our liberal immigration policy, because it's allowing these people to get rid of the class that would replace them by sending them to the West.
So if those people were forced to stay, they'd have no choice, and then they'd make that place better, is what you're saying.
I like, you can't promise anything, right? And I don't.
No, that's interesting. I don't know. Maybe it would.
That's something, right? Like, we can come up with a genuine refugee policy, but most people who come to our country are not refugees. The definition of a refugee is that you can't be like, oh, well, I'll be richer in Germany than I will be in Iran. Mm-hmm. Like, I know many Iranians; they're great people, high civilization. You know, one of a very educated culture. You know, very impressive in so many ways, right? Okay. But like, I don't consider it a legitimate, like, a guy who's college educated and is really, really motivated. If it's just like, I want to come to Germany because I'll make more money, like, that's not a good enough reason.
Sure, no, absolutely, which is why I think culturally wise, it wouldn't be enough to just say, I just want to profit. There has to be some kind of a patriotic call, if you will, which I know it sounds ridiculous, because how could they be patriots if they're not from the original country? But if they really try to embody the values and we could somehow show that, then I think it would be fair. I'll give you another example, Dave. If Willy offered the example of a company, let's say an example of colleges, right? Like, I don't think any of us think it's fair that we have like these Asian kids who have to take harder tests and still not able to pass those tests, you know, in order to get into these Ivy Leagues.
I didn't even know that. That's crazy.
Yeah, that's been happening, where there's a certain hierarchy. If you happen to be white, and then if you happen to be Asian,
you got to take a harder test.
Yeah. Well, they grade you. Yeah, they grade you a lot tougher.
This is the consequence of affirmative action.
That's fucking insanity. But okay,
yeah, but this is what we agreed to when we agreed to these 1970s post-civil rights legislation. This is the logical consequence of that.
But the reason why I bring that up...
brutal.
Okay, the reason why I bring that up, and I think FAIR, that organization I mentioned, has also been fighting on behalf of the people who have been affected by this, again, with their high-powered lawyers. But the reason why I bring that up is because let's imagine, and I know, Dave, in before you talk about why this cannot be done, let's imagine for a second we do end up having a situation where these colleges have a much fairer system of getting in, where if you are not up to snuff, you're not going to get in. And we could say, well, there is still an equality of opportunity to go to those colleges, as far as if you put in the work, if you measure up to being what it means to be a Yale student or a Harvard student, then you would get in.
Yeah, but if Yale and Harvard were forced to admit blindly to names and ethnicity and to political signaling on essays, like, they would admit mostly Asians and some white people. Okay,
but here's the reason why I'm talking about these universities. No, but the reason why I'm saying this is not having to specifically do with an educational institution. I'm putting an educational institution here just like as an example, as a stand-in for a country, meaning that when you were talking about the complaints that people would have about immigration, what I would throw back at you is comparing that to the colleges, where when you do have pretty liberal organizations like FAIR who are advocating on behalf of people who are unfairly, having, a rising standard for how to get in there, I would equate that with saying, why not have the same equality of opportunity towards immigration? That's all I'm saying, where it doesn't sound as extreme as you put it. Not to say that there wouldn't be people against this. Of course there fucking would. But my point is trying to see, like, why is this so horribly unequal of a situation? I don't know.
Well, I mean, it's because that's not how these political situations work in the real world. In the real world, the incentive is always to go in the direction of affirmative action and of a permissive immigration policy. Maintaining standards does not give you immediate political benefit.
And that is a different conversation, though. And I understand what you're saying. The reason, again, why I'm offering this up is because the alternative right now seems to be saying that if you do happen to be from, this country or that country, or if you happen to be of this racial characteristic, a lot of people in the far right would say, well, then just point blank, you're not going to be welcome. And again, this is why I'm saying, I'm not saying that everybody's going to be on board for what I'm talking about here, but I'm just trying to still point out, like, hey guys, why can't something like this be what you can take up as your mantle? Why do you have to go all the way to creating grievances that shouldn't be there in the first place? You're creating fifth columns where there needn't be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for making exceptions when you need to make exceptions, but you know, what they say is they always say that the exceptions make bad policy. You want to make exception. You want to make your policy based on the average case.
But that goes back to the idea of liberalism. I think this is where we do disagree on heavily. This is kind of like the fork in the road, because the problem you're pointing out is the problem that liberalism always has to deal with. And I equate it to brushing your teeth. If you don't brush your teeth, you're going to get yellow teeth and they're going to fall out. Same thing when you want a very quick solution, accelerationism, whatever. Not you. I'm just talking in general, like about a lot of reactionary people. They want this quick solution. They want everything to exactly work the way that they want it. And if not, they don't want to hear about it. It's very impatient. And that is why I want to offer something here which can address potentially a lot of the problems we're talking about. It's not fully fleshed out, but
well,
maybe
the
there is
reason
something
why
there.
I think I've heard this a lot, and I respect your answer. But the reason why a lot of people like myself are saying, well, it has to be quick, it has to be fast, it has to be a radical change, is that people have been talking about reforming these abusive systems for at least 30 years now. The 90s was 30 years ago now. And that's, we had the first affirmative action lawsuits in the 80s, and there was another set in the 90s. And we've had legislation against this stuff, and nothing has changed. And all these organizations that try to do these things that FAIR have been doing, I mean, there are organizations like that in the 90s. They made no headway. So I don't know. I don't see how, if it could turn around, why hasn't it turned around already?
The only counter that I would give, which I gave earlier, is you may be seeing this in the negative, that you were saying that these conservative opinions were in the 90s and now they're being taken up by the liberals. I see that as actually an evolution in the way, because now you're getting a lot of these Bill Maher types to start seeing certain sense. You could say, oh, it's too late. We don't want you there anymore. You had your chance.
Well, but Bill Maher was doing this in the 90s. Remember that? He had a show called Politically
Incorrect, yes.
He was trying to take the left to task for its excesses. And then, 5 years later, he was hopping on the bandwagon of the very excesses he called out in 1998.
Which excesses was he jumping on the bandwagon of?
Well, I mean, okay, I know you're going to think this is stupid, but he was a huge booster of Barack Obama.
Oh, people fuck up. What do you want me to say? I don't know. I mean, look, Barack Obama did not do certain things that he promised to do as far as closing Gitmo, but there was this feeling, the hope change, whatever. You get the idea. We've all been through that. By the way, Willie, my feeling with Barack Obama when it got lowered down was when he passed the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act, which got rid of habeas corpus for what was it, for like when you're like a terror suspect or something. It's I don't know, it's a very problematic thing that I don't think got reversed. Plus, I think he legalized more or less propaganda in the news. Is that right, Dave? I don't remember exactly what that act was called. I think that was also around 2012.
I'm drawing a blank. I'm sorry.
No problem. It's been a long day.
And I was largely a kid when the Big B was in office anyway, so I don't necessarily know, but I do remember him being a hella baller in basketball, so I do respect him for that. Look, when it comes to aspects of immigration, I think that's really important. It's a really important set of policies, right? Because even like you've had guys like Joe Biden be like, look, we can't just let people come willy-nilly across the border, right? However, when it comes to like shit like race as topics, I think it's kind of just like a super poisonous topic in terms of people get caught up in details that don't really matter, and it just turns into like weaponizing it.
Well, the topic is forced
to push different agendas. Like I don't think race should be like an aspect of fucking anything people really talk about, because I don't think it should be relevant. You know, outside of like maybe some old school like housing policies that are super racist that maybe we should get rid of. Like I've heard like redlining or something.
Redlining was ended in 1968.
But yeah, sure, you get what I'm saying though, right? Like for the most part, I think
but I actually disagree, because I don't want to talk about race, but how can you avoid it? It's forced into the conversation. Like how can you?
I could tell you how.
But that's the point. It shouldn't be
with
forced
the stuff that happened post George Floyd. How could you avoid talking about differential crime rates between races?
Dude, that's a decent fucking point though. Like the George Floyd stuff, like black people do face an in proportion amount of stuff towards cops, right? Cops definitely.
But I think the important
so I think that's fair, right?
Hold on. I want to hear. Repeat that point again, Willie.
Okay.
Black people definitely, cops definitely treat black people with a certain level of harshness that they don't treat white people. So I think that's.
But there's a second part of that, which is that black people commit massively higher rates of crime. And when you adjust for the higher crime rate,
does that justify? Look, I don't know how true that is. If black
people get arrested, if black people get arrested in proportion, they should get arrested in proportion to the crime rate, not in proportion to their population level, right?
No,
dude, but over and over again, we've seen fucking video of like.
Yeah. Well, here's how I can. Okay.
Choked out. That shouldn't be.
All right, everybody, please. I got to be the man in the middle here.
Go ahead.
To straighten all of this out, and here's how I'm going to do that. I think you're absolutely right, Willie, in that the focus on race is absolutely dumb. What I think the focus should be on is culture. Meaning, again, like I say before, how are kids raised? What kind of family situation did they have? Thomas Sowell, for instance, who is this black conservative gentleman, he talks a lot about these problems within the black community when it comes to single motherhood, things of that nature.
Sure.
Things that a lot of, let's say, more left-leaning people pretend that they care about black people so much. Meanwhile, they don't do diddly squat when it comes to helping out these particular situations. What I would personally focus on is putting a lot of money and a lot of effort into getting kids who are in the ghetto right now, like 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds who come from a single mother situation, getting them the right role models, getting them the right people that could be in their lives.
That? Like, how do you fix that?
Well, I think for
We've been talking about this for years, right?
Yeah, it's like impossible, right?
But it comes back down to the family. It comes back down to making sure that families are going to be together, for them to be passing on the right values to one another. That's really where the big issue lies, honestly. Like, a lot of this other talk is just superfluous. There's no need for it.
And the marriage rate,
I mean, there definitely is a reason.
Declining across the last 50 years, right? All the while we were talking about gay marriage that was continuously declining, right?
Yeah. But again, it's like with the gay marriage, let gay people do whatever. That's besides the point. The point is, if you want to focus on marriage, good. Let's focus on families. Let's focus on bringing people together. I think that's a beautiful thing, right, Willie? Like, that's...
Real quick, though. There is a comment that says, Willie, like, dash, I've seen the news, like, kind of mocking me, right? Is that not true? Is the news wrong when they're saying black people are disproportionately being, held to a different standard than white people? Is that not true?
What the news says, look, I'll walk you through this. What the news,
because I am a normie.
Hold on, Willie, I'll walk you through this. Okay, it's really easy. Okay. The news is giving you a half truth. The half truth they're telling you is that black people are targeted by the police much more than their percentage in the population. Yes. Right? That is true. But what they're not telling you is that black people commit an enormously higher number of crimes than the average person in the population. And so when you adjust for the crime and not for the population level, there's no statistically discernible abuse from that number. They're getting
arrested. That right to do, though?
No, you adjust by the crime, not by the population level, right?
I can give Willie this example.
I mean, how would you? So would you if black people commit murder, would you not arrest them for murder so that they don't arrested for murder?
Right. So if the person murders somebody, then yeah. But just because the person's black, I don't think you should assume they murdered somebody.
No, but more
what I'm
murders
saying?
proportionally are committed by black people, right? So you're going to
Okay.
disproportionately target black people if you arrest all the murderers, right? Do you see what I'm saying?
I can give another example if you want. So let's
I
say
don't
if
know
we're
if I
talking,
do.
let's say if we're talking about Europe, for example, and I don't want to bring the gypsies into it, but for example, let's say
Sure.
there's like the stereotype of the gypsies going around and stealing whatever, right? And there's a lot of Europeans that have a certain kind of education. We're not talking like British working class. We're talking, I don't know, Germans or whatever the hell, Irish. And let's say that there's a certain kind of culture there where they go to school and their parents and their relatives, they have a specific kind of value system. And then they have gypsies who go and they steal certain things from them. So when the cops come in with their billy clubs or whatever, they're going to be specifically looking for the gypsies because it's not because there's some weird genetic thing going on
Because
there. But
statistically, that's what they expect.
yeah, because the values that were passed down from one generation
kind of
to
grim
another.
when you put it that way.
Yeah. No, but
Okay,
the big
but that disparity has to be there. If one demographic group commits more crimes, then police have to target the ethnic group more if they're going to enforce the law. How can that not be the case?
Yeah, I mean, I don't look. I can't argue very well against this. I don't know. I'm hearing this all for like the first time.
What we
right?
can do later on, by the way, Willie, if
know.
you're interested, I could bring in my friend Hotep Sophia. She's a black woman living in she lived in Washington D.C. before, but her parents have lived in the United States, since fucking forever, and she very well documented a lot of the occurrences throughout the decades. For example, she was talking about how those neighborhoods where the police were cracking down on a lot of crimes having to do with, crack, for example, how what is not really spoken about was how a lot of the black leaders within those communities, according to her, were begging the police to go in there and to make those arrests because they were seeing their own community start to deteriorate because of all the drug dealing that was going on. So it's not a very clear-cut thing if we're talking about, like this race versus that race, anything like that. According to her, it's more like these are very big problems that have to be dealt with. These so-called black leaders don't do anything to help the situation, especially today, especially when, according to her, the church is not playing as active of a role as it once did in terms of the mentorship of a lot of these kids. So it's a complicated situation, but unfortunately, these are things that, you can't not address them, but the goal, I think, is never to look at it from this very static stone way of saying, oh, because these people happen to be from so-and-so race, they are doomed to. That is bullshit. This is a cultural problem, and we have seen so many people coming out from these situations and leading absolutely different lives. So
what does that mean? What is that?
Can I say, though, too, real quick?
Sure.
I do feel like I am a hair bit uncomfortable because we are way out of pocket from anything I know. All right.
Yes. Yeah, I
to
completely
be clear,
understand.
so
Yes.
I'm a little uncomfortable in this situation.
No, I don't want to make you uncomfortable.
Okay.
All I can do is bring you the information that I was brought from the
Okay.
people who have come on the show, and I don't want to put you into any bad situation. If you want to later on come in, I would love to bring Hotep Sophia, have a longer conversation about this kind of stuff as well.
I'd come on again because you guys have been nice to me and you've been very professional in emails, or whoever's been sending the emails. I don't know.
I've been
yeah, absolutely. But I am out of pocket here for sure.
Yeah.
But
No,
I don't understand what is saying it's culture. How does that actually change the conversation? Like, how does that?
It changes everything because
you can't control culture. If you could control culture, it would change everything.
Yes, you can. Look at North and South Korea. These are the same people genetically, yet culturally they're very different. So of course you can control culture.
Okay, so why haven't we just fixed the black community? Why didn't we hit that switch?
Because it takes time.
I've been hearing about this for 30 years now.
Yeah, because it takes time. We have to figure out better ways of going about it. It has not worked yet. A lot of things haven't worked out in history for a long time until they do. Just saying that something is forever doomed to be a certain way is stupid. So I am at least going to try as much as I can to figure out certain things here, and I encourage everybody to do the same thing. Otherwise, what are we doing? Otherwise, we're we're just giving up, and I am never going to give up. Anyway, that is all I gotta say about that.
Yeah, I think if nothing has been demonstrated, the last 30 or 60 years have shown that we can't fix this problem this way. It's just hope against experience.
We haven't been fixing this problem at all. In fact, what we've been doing is
worse.
It has gotten worse. It has gotten worse in certain circumstances. Sure, we've have leaders that do absolutely nothing to address this problem. But again,
they do stuff to address the problem, but what they do doesn't fix the problem. What they do to address the problem is do all this woke shit and increase affirmative action policies and put their friends in power.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is, let's not do that. Let's do the kind of things that I'm proposing. That's what I'm saying. And what you're saying is, all these 30 years we've been doing all this stupid bullshit. Well, of course it's not going to work if we've been doing stupid bullshit. Of course it's not going to work then. That's my point.
I don't think we've actually been doing, like, I think that it's not like there is some kind of conservative plan to fix this. I mean, I guess, like, if you used very hard-handed anti-liberal measures, you might be able to fix this in like 300 years.
I don't think it's going to be anti-liberal measures. But anyway, look, WillyMac, we're putting him in a really weird situation now because this is very far from...
anyway, but...
I know. No, but the point is, again, just to leave both of you with this idea, I think that it is possible to fix a lot of these things. We have to get our mind out of this doomer scenario of, we are destined to have this, clash and... have a dictator come in and then it's going to reset everything. I think that is a very... I mean, look, I don't have a crystal ball, neither do you, neither does Willy. But I'm going to try as much as I can to figure out a way out of it.
I think that, I mean, the polls we've been hearing have been kind of ridiculous on all these fronts. They won't fix the disparities.
Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have a lot more streams coming up. BTR is just getting started. I am going to bring all the experts in, all the people who are... Yes! Don't you laugh, damn it! Don't you laugh! Do you remember that scene from Clockwork Orange with the that Hitler mustache?
That's a classic, yeah.
Yeah, you remember that police officer guy who was standing there with the Hitler mustache? And then there was that priest who was saying, "Don't you laugh, damn it, don't you laugh. I saw you number 633, whatever." So that's what I'm saying. Those who are laughing now will be crying later. You remember that?
I have to clarify something in this because I'm seeing someone from my Telegram group say that misunderstand my policies. I am perfectly fine, and actually I think it would be prudent if Poland said, we want an immigration policy that will keep this country 80% Polish or 90% Polish. As a matter of fact, I think that would be a good idea. I think that the immigration policy should keep a country some very large percent. I don't think there should be large demographic shifts in ethnicity, period. I don't know how anyone got the idea. I thought anything different than that. Israel has that policy, and I don't see why Poland shouldn't too.
No, Israel. Well, as far as Israel goes, Israel has Ashkenazi Jews, Sephardic Jews. It has Arabians. It has... Hold on. Don't you laugh, damn it. It has Arabians who are both Jewish and Muslim, as well as Druze. It has Ethiopians. So I'm listening to fucking colors of the rainbows over
here. This is bullshit, though. I'm sorry, Lev.
Why is that
bullshit? Immigration policy explicitly is designed to make sure that they do not lose a Jewish supermajority. That if they use the same standards for Muslims as they did for Jews, that country would not be a majority Jewish in 5 years. The number of people who have legitimate claims to move back to Israel is enormous. And if they're like, because any Jewish person could essentially move to Israel with very, very little questions asked. If Arabs could move to Israel with the same standard, Israel would rapidly be a non-majority Jewish state, and the government would rapidly collapse.
Dave, here's
the question I got here is what happened. All right, a bunch of fucking Mexicans or whatever move in here, right?
Wait, hold on, Willy. I'm sorry to interrupt, but before your question, I have to say this to Dave. Dave, if somebody is Arabian but is Jewish, are they allowed to become an Israeli citizen?
I think
I
so.
don't know the finer points of the law. They've been interested recently.
The answer is yes. The answer is yes, because Israel is not an ethno-state. It is a religious state. So you can be Arabian, and if you're Jewish, you could be a member.
Atheist. Bullshit. You can get in if you're Jewish and atheist. I know Jewish atheists have gone into Israel with low questions asked.
I know that too. So
okay,
it doesn't matter.
Can you get in as an African atheist? No.
No, but you have to be an African Jew. But you have to be an African Jew, and you have to kind of prove that you can be Jewish.
I feel
enough.
like we're
no. Look. There is an obvious ethnic component to Israel's immigration policy. Look, I'm not against it. It's fine.
I even agree with that.
That's totally cool, right? But don't tell me they don't have that standard. They absolutely have that ethnic standard.
But again, if we're talking about whatever birth rates are, look, I agree with you when it comes to the birth rates from the Hasidic Jews within these very particular areas of Israel. I understand what you're talking about there. My only point is if you happen to be of the Jewish faith and are Arabian or are Ethiopian, you are going to be a citizen of Israel. There is no problem with that happening. And I'm not saying that there aren't some weird loopholes, like there are certain people who just pretend to be Jewish, kind of go through the back door, whatever. That's going to happen. It's not a perfect society. But the point is that there is still this emphasis on not discrimination based on genetics, and that is not what I advocate
Israel
for.
has used genetic tests in the past to admit for immigration. If they are not currently doing so, they have certainly done that in the past.
Well, whatever they've done in the past, do you disagree with what I was saying as far as the Arabians and the Ethiopians go, being Jewish, being able to be citizens of Israel?
I don't know if Western countries could use standards like Israel's to keep their demographic majority in place, that would completely satisfy most right-wingers' issues. If we universally agree that you can say oh, hey, you can come into the country if you have this stringent religion or if you have this ethnicity, that would probably satisfy most right-wingers' objections. And it was done in circles to keep a majority ethnicity.
Okay, as far as the religion and the ethnicity part, that works for Israel. As far as the United States, I would still advocate for the whole cultural thing.
There are millions of Arabs. There are, I think there are about a million. I think there are millions of Arabs. There are millions of Arabs that have legitimate claims to be occupiers of that territory in the past, and they're getting passed over in favor of Jewish people, Jewish atheists who have never lived in that country.
Yeah. And passed over in favor of Jewish Ethiopians. Why are you forgetting the Ethiopians? Have you not understood how many Ethiopians?
Clause, right?
It's a pretty fucking big one, man. It's a pretty fucking big one, because here you have people who are of a complete genetic history, whatever you want to call it, being full-fledged immigrants and members of Israel. What the fuck are we talking about here?
As long as you admit some people from another race, you can have an immigration rate that explicitly takes into account
as
race
long as you don't restrict immigration based on some kind of genetic standards, because that's what I am against.
So how about this? Poland's new policy will be: we let in only Polish people and priests of any race. That would satisfy the Israel condition, right? So, African priests can come in, African nuns can come in, Guatemalan priests can come in, but of the non-priests,
look,
only let in Poles.
We're talking in circles to a fucking
this is not a circle. That would satisfy Lev's standard for being a non-racist immigration policy.
Look,
we did it.
Wait, hold on. See, now I'm too tired to think. All that I'm going to say, Dave, is that all I want is for people who are of a certain civilization level that is equal to the country that they want to immigrate to, being able to be a part of that, as long as it's not too full. If it's too full, that's a different story.
Bro, are we talking about ethno-states right now? What the fuck's happening?
We're talking about Israel. We're talking about Israel.
No, I already told Dave about
Israel is. That's what we're talking about.
No, Dave. I already told you about Israel. Willie, my whole thing is, and I think you would agree with me here, as long as people can get along at the same level as the place that they want to be a part of, as long as that place isn't
Surely
full,
people would not
then
move
they
to
can
a
get along.
place if they could not get along, right?
What are you talking about? Of course they will.
Like what?
What do you mean? Like, would you assume that most the immigrant populations in France are getting along with the native populations? Is that?
I mean, dude, you expect me to know anything about France? You're fucking crazy, dude.
Okay, so
the fucking baguette cheese eaters. I don't know fucking dick about France.
Do you know anything about immigration rates over the course of human history?
Like in the United States, I don't think it's largely like I don't think the Mexicans are coming over and like fucking taking over cities or shit. I don't know.
Okay, no, but like the United States is not the only example of immigration.
I know, but I mean,
there have been many examples of immigrants that have just come in and conflicts immediately erupted. That's a common historical occurrence.
Okay, what's going on in France where that's going on?
Look,
this is going to take
the example. Yeah, I have to go. This is going to take too long. Like, it's been great talking to you. Okay,
it has, Dave. Okay. I appreciate the time.
Good talking to you.
Have a good night. Okay.
Have a good night, Dave.
Right,
all right. So the last thing that sure, go for it.
Can I say something about Dave?
Yes, you can.
He is somebody where I immediately do wonder when it comes to his content. Is he somebody where I go watch his content and it's like the quartering where I'm like, is he constantly, baiting towards one side of the political spectrum where it's just all constant bait and fucking red herrings towards that? Because I do feel like I was getting that vibe a little bit. I don't know if he's actually like that. I need to watch him more, but it did feel like it's constant fucking rage bait.
I mean, it's okay. I don't want to speak for Dave. He's not here right now. The only thing that I can say is that I think that there are very important questions that Dave brings up when it comes to things like the immigration question. The only thing is that I think it gets taken way too far in the end result being, and again, I'm not saying that he's specifically advocating for this, but he doesn't leave that much room other than to say that countries should just be able to bring in people specifically based on whether they have this certain kind of DNA or not. My whole thing again, but to the things that he was talking about, which I think are important. I understand like you're coming at this from like a completely like an outsider, and I appreciate the fact that you have the patience to endure all of this. But coming in here from an outsider, what I could say about the France situation in particular is that you do have people that have come over who are like I said before, military-aged men, majority who they come from a very different kind of culture. They were raised in a very different way, a very tough culture, a culture that's very different from like ooh la la, that culture of France. Sure. And they end up getting into a lot of situations where they end up joining gangs, where they end up making a lot of mischief, for lack of a better word, in these countries. They end up committing a lot of crime. It has nothing to do with their DNA. What it has to do is the culture that they were brought up in. Because out of all these places, you're going to have scholars and poets and whatever that come out. So that already is signs to me that there is no such thing as saying like this particular group of people is doomed to always being this way, because we always see the exceptions. And because there are the exceptions, what I think is a completely fair way of going about this is to have the kind of immigration policy where you would be able to judge, and again, I'm not the expert here right now as far as how to create this, but you would be able to judge fairly that whichever family, assuming there's room in your country, whatever family wants to come in, that when they're going to be in there, they're going to raise their kids other than, let's say, the holidays or, like whatever food they have. They're going to raise their kids just like the other kids are going to be in their village or town or wherever they're immigrating to. I think that's absolutely fair. I think that is absolutely non-biased. You would want the same thing, right? Like you would want to live somewhere where you would know that the people who are going to be in your neighborhood are going to raise your kids in a very similar way as far as what their values are. I think that's very fair.
Yeah, I mean, sure. Look, I don't know, right? Like, I agree with that. I think
the end point. You agree with the end point.
Dave clearly knows fucking more than me on any of this shit, right? I just do want
knowledge. Knowledge is not everything. You could always learn more. That's the important thing here. You could always learn more.
I was wondering if I was getting a little bit of a quartering vibe from that shit. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
it does rub me a certain way when I do hear certain just certain lines is all.
All I can say here, Willie, is that if this is in any point, like this could be just like a meteor flew over and you watched it, or you saw like a train that was riding, was on fire. It's like, ooh, that's pretty interesting. If this is something, on the other hand, that maybe you were kind of inspired by, because you, despite whatever you were saying earlier about like, oh, I'm just, whatever, I'm just like doing these drama
videos.
About
fucking Jake Paul, bro.
Yeah, you're talking about Jake Paul, exactly. So if you have any time on your hands at all, if you ever get interested in reading, I think it would be very interesting for somebody like you, who I think does have a stable head on your shoulders, somebody who's grounded to reality, somebody who I think has common sense. Read some more. Read about a lot of these things, and I don't think there's that much that's going to separate you from anybody who you see as being like at some higher intellectual level other than time. You know what I mean? Like,
sure,
that's something.
It depends how much value I think there is in learning stuff about that, because if shit's just gonna happen, right? Like immigration's just gonna happen, I can't fucking control it, and I don't know how much value there is in me dedicating shit to that.
No, that is a very fair point.
It comes down to, do I find that interesting? Do I find that fun? And maybe I come to the same conclusions as some of you guys do, or maybe I come to different stuff. But I don't know. It's all interesting. It's all topics that are definitely out of my realm right now. Maybe as I get older, I find that more interesting.
I mean, it's possible.
It's been fun.
Yeah.
It's been a fun conversation.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool when you're in a conversation where people are talking about concepts that are like outside the realm of what you know. I do find that fun.
Well, that's kind of what Break the Rules does. Break the Rules is supposed to be bring people. I mean, that's the
breaking
rule.
the rules on Break the Rules.
Exactly. Well, that's the ultimate rule that's being broken. The rule of you being where you are and Dave being where he is. Never the two shall meet. Well, not if I can help it. So
your chat is fucking a riot too. I love your YouTube chat. They're fucking shitters. I'm about this shit. This is definitely some fucking fun stuff for me. Hell
yeah, absolutely. Well, before we go, I just want to say, first, where could people find you? For all the people who are interested in WillyMac, where could people find the great WillyMac?
The best stuff is WillyMac Show. That's where I'm at. Sometimes I sub for Keem on Drama Alert every now and then. But for the most part, WillyMac Show, that's what I'm trying to grow. That's what I'm trying to do. It's me basically talking about YouTube drama for the most part. I'm more educated in shit when it comes to YouTube and censorship and stuff like that than I am necessarily in the political sphere. But I do talk about people that think they're political geniuses, that are completely fucking idiots, like Hassan. I don't know. Hassan, that guy's a fucking idiot. Anybody that just, got to graduate high school can understand that, I think.
Yeah,
I make comedy videos for the most part. I'm the Daily Show.
Excellent. So, guys, please subscribe to WillyMac. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Oh, by the way, here's what's going to be happening this week. So this week, Grim Hood is coming to town. I'm going to have a Grim Hood on who's going to be talking about health-related things, and I'm inviting all the patrons from patreon.com/breaktherules to come in and join in the discussion. Grim is going to be talking about a lot of things having to do with healing yourself, healing your body, getting into the best shape of your life. And there we go. That is what you got to do. Patreon.com/breaktherules, so you can be there in the stream with Grim Hood talking about that. And that is not all. No, sir. We are going to have a lot of great stuff coming up later on. So please be sure to subscribe, keep subscribing, add a like. It's going to help out the algorithm. And that's it. This has been a fantastic conversation. Thank you very much, WillyMac. Thank you very much, Dave.